transboundary water resources. So to join our moderator for this session, we have our panel, Dr. Sufia Khanum, Senior Research Fellow, Bangladesh Institute of International and Strategic Studies, BIISS. We have Mr. Sudeep Chakravarti, Associate Professor of South Asian Studies and Director, Center for South Asian Studies, CSAS, University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. And last but not the least, we have Razmi Farooq, Director of Asia and Humanitarian ActionAid International. She's going to be joining us online. So yes, I welcome all our panel members. Without any further ado, let's give a big hand for our panelists for the session, Multilateral Water Cooperation and Governance. Thank you.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. I'm sure you have enjoyed the heavy lunch, but we have a very heavy topic in our hand, which is multilateral water cooperation and governance. As the presenter actually, and the master of ceremony actually introduced our speakers as well as our presenters, let me quickly set the tone. Of course, we are talking about water governance, and before lunch you have heard that how transboundary issues, for example, regarding policy and legal framework, how complicated things can be. And during open discussion, you could see how it turned towards politics, because it is really, really sensitive issue and highly political. But I think we have evolved a lot over the last 15 years or so. I can tell you a very quick story. Back in 2009, I used to work for IUCN, and we were designing a project. And you know that when you design a project, you call it some other name. We used to call it Transboundary Project. But when the project was signed, it was called Ecosystem for Life, Bangladesh-India Initiative. No, the transboundary word was removed, because back then it was quite sensitive to use the word transboundary. But fast forward 7 years, in 2017, when Oxfam actually started a CETA-funded project, it named TROSA. T stands for transboundary. So we can see that through discussion, conversation, track 2, track 3, interaction, things can move quite fast. Before I say anything more, let me they will be introducing themselves very quickly. First, I would like to ask very quickly Dr. Sufia Khanum to quickly introduce herself. Thank you.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. This is Dr. Sufia Khanum. I am working as a Senior Research Fellow for the Institute of International and Strategic Studies, BIISS. It's an autonomous research organization which is administratively controlled by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think.
And Dr. Khanum, she has been working in this area, transboundary water governance, security, marginalized communities, on them for last 15 years or so. Dr.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Sudeep Chakravarti or Sudeep Chakravarti. And Assalamu alaikum, namaskar, namaste, vanakkam. Whatever works in a transboundary river discussion. We are good. This is South Asia. I teach at the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. And I run the Center for South Asian Studies, or CSAS, which we are very cool about. And delighted to be here, and I am not associated with the government or the private sector. Even though I teach at ULAB and I represent ULAB very faithfully, I do carry an independent mind and an independent brain, or so I would like to think. So that's me. That photograph is from several years ago. So don't always take everything at face value. I would urge us to look a little deeper, de-layer a particular situation, which I hope we will do this afternoon.
Thank you so much. We are running a bit behind of our schedule. Let me move towards Dr. Sufia Khanum. She will be talking. Okay, has she joined? Okay. Can we see her online? Our online participant? Okay, that's fine. Okay, let us hear from Dr. Khanum. She will be talking us about climate diplomacy in South Asia, but she will be giving us a kind of a critical analysis that how sustainable regional transboundary water resource management could be happening. Let's hear from her. Thank you. You have 10, 12 minutes, Dr. Khanum.
Thank you for thank you ActionAid. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present in front of this August gathering, I must say. And we all know that this is an after lunch session, and I know you all are with the full stomach. So if you don't find my presentation is not interesting, you may sleep comfortably. I'll not mind. So with this lighter note, I would like to start my presentation. So the title of my presentation is Whether Climate Diplomacy in South Asia, a Critical Analysis for Sustainable Transboundary Water Resources Management. Although there is a title, but maybe my discussion is not confined within this title. So, that would be the section of my presentation. First, I would like to start with the status of climate diplomacy of South Asia, and second, I would like to focus on the existing transborder climate action, whether is there any transborder climate action, and I would like to focus on the power play in the policy making of the whether it is related with the climate diplomacy or whether it is hydro diplomacy, and I would like to suggest some of the policy recommendation at the end. And if you see the impact of climate change, you will see that in I have collected these figures from others' research report. So you will see that how it will affect in 2021, and obviously it has a great impact on the GDP growth of the total South Asia. And one of the study shown that on average actually 7% of the GDP growth will affected by the impact of climate change. If I see the statistics that Bhutan, it will affect Bhutan like 18%. It is for Nepal 13%, and for Pakistan it is 10%, and for Bangladesh it is near about 10%. And we all know that yearly we lost about $4 billion for this type of climate change induced disaster and climate change impacts. And from the diplomacy perspective, if we see the evolution of the negotiating bloc, because we all know that no individual country actually participated in the climate negotiation as an individual country. We negotiate in a bloc, we negotiate in a groups. So if you see the evolution of the negotiation bloc, you will see that the negotiation blocks are breaking down over the years and getting small to smaller and smallest. Because when there is the climate negotiation, the national interest get priorities in that negotiation table, so that the negotiation blocks are getting smaller day by day. So what about the South Asian countries? So if you see the South Asian status of the South Asian countries, you will see that the Group 77 and China, this is one group, and all the South Asian countries are actually member of this group. And there is another block like-minded developing countries, where Bangladesh, India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka are only the member of this block. And there is basic group, where India is making groups with China, South Africa and Brazil. So their interest is different. And then there is another AOSIS, which is Maldives only the member of this group. This is a very small group, but I would rather say, but their message was very much clear and is strong in the climate diplomacy or in the international forum. And then again, the Climate Vulnerable Forum. Although this forum is not directly connected with the climate diplomacy, they don't participate, they don't negotiate, but it is in the, if you see that, if you consider the, the diplomacy paradigm, you will see that this Climate Vulnerable Forum actually belongs to the para-negotiation circle. And this para-negotiation circle actually very, very influential for the formal negotiation bloc. And within the CVF group, all the South Asian countries are not in member of the CVF group. So when we are talking about the climate change, when we are talking about the hydro diplomacy, we are not even negotiating in the same group. So our national interest is very much significant in this climate diplomacy or the climate negotiation. So how diversified the South Asian countries, this is actually a clear picture of this. And if you see that I know that there are a lot of, existing transboundary climate actions. Some are in the smaller scale, some are in the broader scales. So I have collected some of the examples, but please don't confine with this, only these examples. There are many out of there. So there are some of the weather services and the early warning system. There are some negotiation that is in the South Asian countries. In 2018, the South Asian Hydromet Forum, a regional initiative that was initiated probably by the World Bank, and that brings together a hydrological and meteorological agencies, including Myanmar. So all are trying to build some of the weather services and early warning system to reduce the disaster risks. And there is MOU signed between Bangladesh and India. I think Asif sir has already mentioned that MOU was focused on the, the integrated water management, and there was an important clause also on the Sundarban. Because Sundarban is a biodiversity rich, and Bangladesh and India both are sharing these resources. And there is a clear, clearly mentioned about the Sundarban and how the local people can manage Sundarban efficiently and with this changing climate environment. And if I say the third one, that is the scaling innovative technologies. So Tech Emerge, one of the organization, and climate innovation challenges, they use that the local Wi-Fi system and established in the Uttarakhand, and this information can be shared with the Sri Lankan, the fishermen, so that they can use, they can get the information about the disaster quite early. And there are some other regional and bilateral cooperation regarding the crowdsources data on the coastal erosion and flooding also there. And there are some of the drones for the surveillance and mapping to aid disaster preparedness also is there. And although most of the people said that SAARC is a dead horse now, we all know that the power play between the, the South Asian countries, this is not very much effective nowadays. But some of the organization which is associated with SAARC, like SAARC Meteorological Research Center, SAARC Coastal Zone Management Center, SAARC Disaster Management Center, SAARC Forestry Center, and South Asia Disaster, and this type of organization which is very much associated with SAARC, they are still working on, the data sharing and the disaster preparedness. And we all know that we share some of the data sharing with 6 countries with India. And there is another regional organization like BIMSTEC has a separate wing for dealing with the climate change. And they are trying to, to make a regional framework so that each and every country can work together to control the impact of the climate change. And there is another initiative that is very much, I think, civil society organization like KANSA, and we all know that about more than 200 association are connected with this association. So I think there is a power policy and power and in the policy making process in the South Asia. We all know that there are few climate related study. Most of the study, if you see that they are very much focused on the mitigation adaptation. There are very few documents or the literature on the hydro diplomacy or the climate diplomacy or the relevant diplomacy we have, and the negative effects of the power interplay and how it is actually affecting this regional negotiation or the regional cooperation, we need to look into that. And this is very common feature of the hydro diplomacy of South Asia, because it is very much connected with the international law. We know from the previous presentation that it is very much influenced by the international water laws, and we need to engage the multi-track policymakers, or we need to recognize the multi-track diplomacy and recognize the power asymmetry within the region. And we need to consider the influence of the media, because we cannot, like, there is a common saying that why Farakka open the barrage during the winter. We do not know, because if we don't open the Farakka barrage, it will automatically break down. If you talk about with any engineer in who is dealing with the hydraulics or the hydro infrastructure, they will tell you that Farakka barrage is such a type of infrastructure. If you don't open the Farakka barrage during the monsoon season, it will automatically break down. That is the structural defect, but we don't know, because media, portray in such a way that they are opening the gate during the monsoon, but if they don't open the gate, it will automatically break down. So media influence we cannot actually break down. So there is, I think, we need to see, like we see the physical water, how much water we are getting. We measure it. We have a mental setup. This is enough, this is not enough. So we only consider, like the policymakers, the diplomats, those who are actually dealing with the water, they are only considering this physical and mental water. But water has a emotional, we need to consider it with the emotion, that water has an emotional component. And we also need to consider that water has a spiritual component as well. And this is the nuances of the power interplay, because we all know that we exclude people from the decision making process, and we only focused on the hard infrastructure based adaptation, not the soft part of it. And then again, lack of security framing, that how it can influence our security, our everyday security. We are not very much aware about that. And fourth and finally, zero sum and non-zero sum gain. We need to trade off that. And with this, there are a lot of, can I take 2 minutes more? Thank you. So there is actually two water discourse, I must say. There is old and new water discourse. So what is the old water discourse is? The old water discourse is caught up in the Cold War politics, lack of regional vision, and distrust within the South Asian countries, domestic political instability, and all this burdened by the narrative of unequal treaties like with Bhutan and India, and competition for regional supremacy between India and Pakistan, and focus on the land-centric understanding of South Asia like Sri Lanka and Maldives, things in that way. So in the old discourse, water is a subset of the foreign policy, and the focus was heavily on a piecemeal and a sectoral approach when it comes to water cooperation. And in the new discourse, we are very much focused on the connectivity. There are a lot of connectivity initiative, SSGQ and SASC. I'm not elaborating this because I have a time shortage. And there is integrated water resource management and water, food, energy, ecology nexus. So we are thinking this type of new discourse in the hydro diplomacy in the recent years. So if you, I'm not discussing elaborately in this section. So if you see the hydro diplomacy of South Asia, you will see most of the hydro diplomatic initiative are very, very much bilateral, where it needs the regional approach. So I would like to say that any discourse on shared transboundary is incomplete without recognizing the dominant discourse related to regional governance. And this is particularly true for the South Asia, where a number of bilateral water agreements exist exist without a regional approach to water governance. The penchant for bilateralism over multilateralism has made the transboundary river vulnerable to emerging geopolitical discourse, often a non-starter for the effective water diplomacy. And with this, I would like to conclude here, because we need to reinforce the adaptive approach, because we don't forget that due to the climate change, there is a glacial lake outburst floods. And we need to reinforce the adaptive strategies. And we need to revisit the negotiation framework, that in which framework we are actually negotiating with the international forum. And we need to revitalize the borderlands. We need to reconnect the local people. With this, I would like to thank, and I would like to end up my presentation with a quote from the Einstein, like, if we do the same thing over again and again without incorporating or without changing any component of it, we will get the same result. With this, I would like to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sufia Khanum, for your fantastic presentation. I'm very much encouraged by seeing that you, like previous discussion or session, you also seen the human dimension, emotional aspects of hydrodiplomacy. Thank you very much for touching upon that. Now let us move on to Sudeep Chakravarti. He will be sharing us some urgent imperative when we talk about hydrodiplomacy in this particular region. Dada.
Good afternoon. I was quite interested to see two things. One is that Pakistan and India were grouped together in a section called like-minded countries. As far as I can tell, the last time I checked, they were the least like-minded countries in South Asia, and which is, in Bangla, we call it Noshter Gora, and I think, which is the root of the problem, or the root of the issues for very many things, including the subject at hand, transboundary rivers. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we need to focus on, and I will skip quickly through what was discussed earlier. Points have been very well articulated and made. I don't want to revisit old ground. I would rather move on with the arguments and points presented earlier. I think it is important to acknowledge that it is not a matter of how many laws exist or how many conventions exist in the world or indeed in the region. It is a matter of attitude. I present to you the case of the Geneva Conventions. We don't have just one, we have 4. And if you look at what's happening in West Asia, you look at what's happening in Eastern Europe, you look at what's happened in South Asia and in other parts of the world, you can, if I may speak French, you know that conventions, unless the attitude and the intent exists, they don't mean a damn thing. So also with several conventions in international law, which are applicable to very many things discussed today, such as transboundary rivers, water sharing, justice, what is justiciable, what is justifiable, what can be taken to courts of law, what have legal parameters, what have political parameters. Ladies and gentlemen, I think, to my mind, it all boils down to, as a practitioner, I'm saying it, this not as a water or river water expert, but I do watch foreign policy, I do watch security issues, I do what's happening around in the region, and have done so for a while. From that perspective, I can tell you that conventions don't really matter. It is, I think, the ambient environment which matters, where we are in the graph or in the curve, the learning curve, and the political curve, and the foreign policy curve, and the pressure curve, which is what I'm going to come to at the end, which brings us to bilateral negotiations, multilateral negotiations, and how effectively we conclude these or are able to negotiate these. I think that lies at the root of transboundary water issues in South Asia. And Professor Asif was very articulate when he talked about very many, and here I'm not going to, as I've gathered, I don't have a slide presentation, and I might often be rambling and incoherent, but I actually wish to leave certain thoughts with you. My purpose is not to deliver a lecture, but to plant certain ideas today, and with the hope that in a transdisciplinary manner, we can take these ideas ahead for what we are all here today for, which is essentially to make things work, or make things work better and more effectively. Professor Asif mentioned that there are several precedents that we can look to in the world to see how we can better manage our water resources. I would point to an example in Asia, which I think is extremely crucial, which I think is the Mekong River Commission. There are nearly 24 monitoring stations along the Mekong across 4 countries, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam, where it decants into the sea. And of course, the 5th country, which is really the China in the China shop, is that we forget that Mekong actually originates in China, and China is not part of this monitoring entity. That's another story for about a minute later, when I talk about India and China and other issues, and what Professor Asif again mentioned, that we need to be talking in partnership, and we need to, wherever the river traverses, these countries and these riparian nations need to be in partnership. Otherwise, your water policy will be a bust. It will go nowhere unless all stakeholders, all countries are involved. I would really urge us to look at the Mekong River Commission, because I think it's a terrific example of 4 contentious countries in Southeast Asia who have come together to talk about something that is extremely sensitive, which is the Mekong River, which, as you know, because of climate crisis, is suffering intensely. So, in fact, the negotiations between these 4 countries have become even more urgent. And these 24 or so monitoring stations that this river has is, I think, a template for us to follow in South Asia. Not copy-pasting it, but adapting it. We can learn from Asia. We don't always have to look to the West for everything. When I come to that, I actually talk about, let me get back to the matter of attitude. I think it's all to do with attitude and how we see the region, how we see ourselves. As it has been rightly pointed out, it is largely bilateral. I'm in complete agreement that the future lies, for instance, in the Ganga-Ganges basin being treated trilaterally between Nepal, India, and Bangladesh. If it does not happen, I believe any future negotiation, including the 2026 Ganges treaty renegotiation, will be a failure, because again, you'll be limiting yourself to the Farakka barrage as a benchmark. And as we have learned over and over again from this morning, that is the last thing we should be doing. We should be looking at from the sources of the river and the many dozens of rivers. In fact, there are about 600 rivers and rivulets, if I can count streams and rivulets, that actually decant from Nepal into India and join the streams of the Ganga, which then decants into Bangladesh as the Padma. We need to be sort of tripartite about that. We need to be trilateral about that. We need to be trilateral about the Brahmaputra, which is the Sangpo in Tibet, and which is in the Tibetan Autonomous Region, though it's been recently renamed. That's about as politically incorrect I'm going to get this afternoon. So there's the Brahmaputra, indeed. Brahmaputra, and which then decants into Bangladesh as the Jamuna. And ladies and gentlemen, I offer you, we're talking about transboundary rivers, I offer you the only transgender river in the world. From Brahmaputra, male, to Jamuna, female. And there's magic in our part of the world, we should accept it and move with it. The thing is that we are acceptable, we are accepting of realities when they are presented to us in a palatable manner. And I think that's the way we should be looking at it. I noticed in my colleague, when she presented her talk, that there was a Venn diagram that came to us the end, where India was in the middle, and all 4 countries of South Asia were around it for a very good reason, because these are the countries with which India has transboundary river issues. So the centrality of this matter is not India's size, but the geography of South Asia. We need to understand that it's not always about politics, it's not always about history, it is also about geography, which we completely disregard. Geography is a very important aspect, onto which we layer politics, we layer diplomacy, we layer foreign relations, we layer bilateral relations and domestic politics, and so on and so forth. But we mustn't discount the bedrock of river dialogue, which is geography. It begins with geography, the physicality of it. In that, India is perforce in the middle, and the ironical part is that it's not as if India's not it's not alien to India to negotiate good and effective river water treaties. Because I offer to you a sort of a laundry list of river water treaties that have been negotiated within India through the several Indian high courts and the Supreme Court of India with various provinces of India or states of India, some of which are as large as small countries. So there are very effective, and these are as politically divisive, as incendiary as any India-Bangladesh river dispute, I can assure you that, or a Nepal-India river dispute, or a Bhutan-India river dispute. Riots have taken place in India between Karnataka state and Tamil Nadu state over the sharing of the river waters of the Kaveri River, for instance. I offer to you that. We are well acquainted, since we are in a CSO NGO environment, about the story of the Narmada River, which was disputed or contested, the beginning and the end of it, between 4 states of India: Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Gujarat, and Maharashtra. The Krishna River there have been 2 dispute settlements, Krishna 1, Krishna 2. The Godavari, which is a major river which cuts across 5 Indian states: Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Odisha, and I'm forgetting the one other state. Do forgive me, I should know this, but there are 5 states. And my home in Goa, there is a dispute, 3-state dispute with a river called Madei between Goa, Karnataka, and Maharashtra. These have either been resolved amicably or through acrimony, but through the courts and through legal due process and listening to all parties and through the mechanism of conflict resolution and justice. Right? Madei is, of course, work in progress, but the thing is that it can be done. The thing is, India's done it within India as we speak. There is no reason why India cannot be leveraged or pressured, and that brings me to my somewhat politically incorrect phase of the ending. I'm sorry? The Indus Treaty between India and Pakistan is actually in a more amicable situation than, for instance, the emotion attached to the Ganga issue and the Teesta issue between India and Bangladesh, where you have the World Bank that has stepped in as a referee from right after partition. In fact, I think the Indus Water Treaty, the World Bank stepped in from 1948 or 49 as one of the earliest Bretton Woods actions globally. So I think that is under negotiation, and please understand that through 3 wars between India and Pakistan, the Indus water did not stop flowing. So there are ways out, there are negotiating principles, there are windows of opportunity. It depends on how we take it ahead, how we look at things, how we comprehend things, and how we choose to see the future. So maybe with the Indus Water Treaty, I'll take a minute more, if you please. The Indus Water Treaty, or maybe 2, Indus Water Treaty, I've got it. I've asked permission, thank you very much. Oh, I have 2 minutes now. She's got it right. You're hurrying me. See, we're on the same team.
Not now.
No, all right, okay. So, for heaven's sake. And just when I'm getting warmed up. So, and, this river treaty, which is monitored by the World Bank, or frankly, ladies and gentlemen, not really monitored by the World Bank. Some World Bank officials get money of it. They get very good salaries out of it, but nobody really monitors the damn thing. Only when there is a dispute in the dry season, or when there is an imminent sort of conflict situation like a full-fledged war, then the discussion comes up, will India turn off the Indus tap? As it has happened, India's threatened to, but never really has. Otherwise, there would be absolute chaos in India, in Pakistan, and I think that would lead to a cataclysmic war to which there would be no end. So both sides have played sensibly to that. I don't see any reason why the bull in the china shop, in this particular case India, cannot be leveraged, cannot be cajoled into a situation. And I think Bangladesh is very, very well poised, for instance, to position itself to the run-up, for instance, to the 2026 negotiation of the Ganga Water Treaty. I think it's wonderfully poised to actually now compel India to come to the negotiating table to hammer out a treaty or negotiate a treaty or begin talks for a treaty over the Teesta River. I think it is high time, and there is a reason for that. I mean, it is not emotion, it is practicality, it's realpolitik, which is basically that India and Bangladesh are now connected in ways far deeper and far more intimately than the river systems and the water systems, through roadways, through airways, through transshipment, through trade, through investment, through a sort of a mutual politics, which will take me into an area I don't want to visit. I'd love to, but I won't, not today, another time. But short point, long story short, is that it places Bangladesh in a negotiating position where Bangladesh can actually cajole India diplomatically to say, let's talk Teesta. It is absolutely in a position, and I'll stop, thank you. stop with it. I've been given 2 minutes extra. I'll stop with the real, I'll stop with the China in the China shop, i.e. China. I think, here I'm sort of being an agent provocateur, which is my calling, my true calling, I think. I really believe that with the Indo-Bangladesh situation as it is, and Bhutan has leveraged it very beautifully. Nepal is in the process of leveraging the India-China factor to its own advantage as we speak. I think Bangladesh, to be fair, should be in the mix. And I heard the Chinese ambassador in December speak of, very gleefully I might add, that Bangladesh has approached, or he would welcome Bangladesh to approach China in order to fix all the ills of the Tista Basin that lies in Bangladesh. And China will address those ills which have to do with loss of agricultural productivity, loss of crops, loss of livelihoods, drought issues, reduced channel in the water, so on and so forth. And I can assure you, friends, that that's an intensely productive leverage for Bangladesh to take to a table to say, let's talk Tista. Bring China into the mix. Be shameless about it. It's in your national interest. I think water needs to be treated as national interest, and I believe regional dynamics has come to a point where several national interests, I believe, are converging in more ways than one. And I think that brings us to a situation where we can take ahead the riparian issues and the riparian problems in South Asia to the next level of discussion, of negotiation, moving beyond bilateralism to trilateralism, quadrilateralism, regional arrangements like was being discussed not too long ago. All of it. And it's not one or the other. It's all of it. Whatever works. I think we need to be looking at a future of whatever works. If we do, we're all right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you, Sudeep. Thank you very much. You have touched upon so many things, and of course, some of the proposition would be, not challenged. Maybe some reflection should be heard during the open discussion session.
Yep.
Do we have the speaker, Razmi Farooq, online?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Assalamu alaikum, all participants. I'm Razmi Farooq, the Regional Director for Asia. I'm based in Sri Lanka, so across the pond from where you are. It's really a pleasure to join you all today. Huge kudos to ActionAid Bangladesh for hosting this, and also really honored to be part of this esteemed panel. Some very eloquent speakers that you've had, and some really pertinent points made. And I think this is a really courageous and important conversation that we continue to have, and particularly looking at the regional implications. Definitely, there are significant challenges that panelists have already raised about water challenges in the region, and it requires our commitment, our focus, our ability to really identify ways forward that we can get, continue our momentum around and really see collective success on. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can. Please continue.
Okay, yeah. So I just have a very brief series of slides. I'm mainly here to really share perspectives from ActionAid and its work, the ActionAid Federation and its work in the region, and to really bring some consideration and focus to how we can strengthen our work going forward, building on a lot of momentum and a lot of good work that's already been done by a number of ActionAid organizations in the Asia region and more broadly. I'll just share my slides just to give you something to look at. Let me see if I can do this. I'd say it says hosts only can share the slides. Is it possible to share the slide on that side?
Yes, we are allowing you.
I can't do it from this side. It has to.
No, we have allowed you.
Yeah.
Can you try?
Got it. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, perfect. So, how do I move this on? The beauty of having to come online, you see, it's more challenging. It's not moving. Anyway, right, there we go.
Yeah.
So really highlighting, obviously that South Asia, given the population density and the stretched water resource that has already been explored with some detail and far more technical insight, is clearly a flashpoint, something we really need to keep focus on. And that basically, as we continue to develop and with rapid development, there's a requirement for much more agile policies across the region and much more coherence across the region, and less of the bilateral arrangements that have taken place to date. And for whatever reason, compliance of even the policies that have already been developed are weak. There are insufficient resources and capacity, and there are conflicting economic incentives and goals, corruption, and insufficient intent with our governing bodies. So there's a large role for us to play, particularly as civil society, and to work with our partners in the sort of multilateral agencies, our donors, and others like-minded stakeholders to really explore and challenge some of these issues that are really preventing us from progressing. If you move to the next slide, can somebody move to the next slide, please, on the water stresses? As my previous colleague mentioned, there are a lot of issues around upstream and downstream on rivers like the Brahmaputra, the Kosi, the Mekong. But I thought there were some really good examples as well, and hope in terms of how collaboration can be built, like the Mekong example that the previous speaker gave. And there's a lot that we can learn from that, and that political will and interest to come together and to encourage our countries to collaborate where possible, with the political considerations, bearing the political considerations in mind, is really important. For Bangladesh, obviously, we know very well, and I'm sure you have spoken about it, the impact of climate change and environmental change in Nepal, inter-country riparian river issues in Vietnam. A huge rice bowl that has been affected by the politics of the Mekong Basin. We are, as ActionAid International and our local presence on the ground, really trying to grapple with some of this. And sometimes it's extremely challenging, and it has huge costs to our staff and to our communities that we work with. We are looking at how, through knowledge hubs, can you move to the next slide, please? We can really build a much stronger basis of research and a collective collaboration across the region. We, first of all, are really equipped with our 2018 to 2028 strategy, which focuses on economic justice, climate justice, and humanitarian objectives. And as we have already discussed, I'm sure water and climate change are inextricably linked, exacerbating both water scarcity and water-related hazards. And it cuts through virtually everything that we do. The Asia Knowledge Hub on Water Commons was established in 2012. I think many of you know about this. Farah was very much involved in the inception of it and really has been driving it with the leadership role that ActionAid Bangladesh is playing. But India, Nepal, Pakistan, Vietnam came together to collectively and collaboratively agree on an agenda and trying to really push forward a contextually relevant approach that sides with and promotes the rights of the vulnerable, and really pushing forward participatory engagement and participatory planning, investment in participatory approaches with decision makers, and building that kind of consolidated knowledge and experience and giving voice to those who don't always have it. And it's, obviously gained a lot of momentum. The first conference was in Nepal in 2012, but there have been a number of knowledge building initiatives, including publications, studies, research, quite an extensive stakeholder mapping, how we should engage in the region. And, looking at our local rights programs and, the communities that we work in who are clearly affected by the water scarcity situation, and really understanding indigenous knowledge and indigenous approaches and how this can inform policymakers and planners, and trying to raise that through our advocacy and policy work. Next slide, please. So I think for us, it's been about the struggle and construction. So really the critical consciousness, how can we build that critical consciousness and give voice to it. Really amplifying the struggles that existing groups are facing, organizing and mobilizing stakeholders, and really supporting them to engage in those wider processes where possible. And really also then using our local to global identity to bring these issues to the fore in regional forums, at regional commissions, at platforms where we can, start to really influence outcomes. We've been doing a lot of work at COP as well. Farah's been a big advocate there too, we alongside our other country officers. And even looking at, the issues of loss and damage and the implications that's having, and how can we take forward that in a meaningful way at a country and regional level. We're working closely with universities and institutions, and I think in India, Bangladesh and Nepal, we've made the most headway in terms of really detailing these things out. And I think it's so important, evidence and a structured, clear approach to really consolidating knowledge through local organizations such as ourselves, and really accelerating that voice and visibility is critical to success going forward. Next slide, please. I think really, there are so many examples, as you can see on the slide, in Bangladesh, as I mentioned, in India, the Mekong River Basin, and also looking more broadly as a cross-cutting issue at the role of women in terms of their advocacy work and their experiences of water issues and river policies, and how do we bring their voices to the fore, really promoting climate resilience, agricultural practices, again, as I said, traditional knowledge, looking at both local and national governance systems. It's still so overseen and not included. It's not granular. A lot of the policies that are in place, the bilateral policies, are very anti-poor. They don't take into consideration the issues of displacement, loss of livelihood, and there's a lot of work to do on that front. And then to my final slide, please. I think, I just wanted to sort of end with just really saying, we at ActionAid are really committed to, ensuring that we continue this cross-country collaborative learning and engagement opportunities, and work with our peers in the sector to really share this knowledge and to try and come together to bring credible information and data to policymakers, and to find the right ways in which to do that, both through quiet diplomacy and through active campaigning. And we are basically, really feel the importance of civil society engagement, and really leading that civil society engagement. And I think you can see through our organizations on the ground in Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Vietnam, they are doing it and learning and doing it and reinforcing the methods, and continuing to build experience and confidence. And I think that we have a lot to build on. We will engage with resilient water and sanitation management issues as an urgent priority at the global and regional level, looking at climate adaptation, at our justice work, and really how we can build this into our climate campaign strategy, which is the really big focus of our Strategy 2020. We launched our funding. We launched our climate campaign last year, and we have a huge ambition to take this forward over the next few years. So really, as part of that, we'll be advocating for innovative approaches aligned with broader water security and resilience goals, and to tackle the impending challenges being faced in the region. So really, I think, having sort of expressed that, I think what's really important and the key takeaways for us is, it's so contextual. It's so based on local priorities, needs, and knowledge. And, we really need to find the right frameworks and support the right frameworks, and support government to make the right decisions in our roles as civil society, and in terms of the access that we have. And I think that, there's a lot we can do, and we're committed to it. So thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Razmi, for sharing what ActionAid has been doing in this region. And there are so many things to do. And thank you very much for emphasizing on, the diversity that we have, the context. So contextualization with a robust framework is so important. Now, the floor is open. We can take a few questions or any comments, but please do state your name first, then the question very specific and mention who you are actually addressing to. Please, gentlemen on my right, left.
Hello, my name is Abrar Farhan Zaman from the University of Liberal Arts Bangladesh, better known as ULAB. I'm interning at the Center for South Asian Studies under Mr. Chakraborty, and my question is directed towards him. Sir, you mentioned that in the past there were some successful case studies between internal water sharing in India, even between as many as 4 different actors. Could you give us a few pointers as to why that case study was successful and how we can learn from that as a blueprint and use it in other negotiations? Thank you.
Well, thank you. I didn't quite expect that question, but I'm glad you asked it. I think there is during my brief presentation, I brought up the aspect of timing. There's a certain time and place. There's a certain place in the graph of negotiation that you need to be in order to come to a certain conclusion. That's how negotiations begin and hopefully end. Otherwise, they're in stall. If you don't reach the right time at the right place with the right momentum, negotiations don't take place, or they don't take place conclusively without it being zero-sum. I noticed that you were talking about moving from zero-sum to win-win. That's if we are to move towards that environment, then we need to pay attention to the graph of time and place, right? In India's particular case, I believe that there was greater political momentum within India because of the nature of domestic politics of India, and to conclude these negotiations in the treaties without a zero-sum approach, because you can't say that the Congress Party or the Bharatiya Janata Party will win in one state and go against the other state. So what happens to their political future when provincial elections come around the next time? They'll lose. So the political nature of India, or Indian federalism, or Indian parliamentary democracy, leads to a situation where the zero-sum game is typically not played between states, except for a notable exception in the case of the Narmada River, where many people have felt, and to my mind correctly so, that to serve the interests of one state, largely Gujarat, the interests of 2 other states through which the Narmada River flows, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra, have been sacrificed. And that has led to an immense amount of human suffering, displacement, loss of livelihood. And it's actually a test case of how not to do a treaty. But that has been redressed to some extent, at least judicially. There has been some movement. It is not a perfect example. I think that which is why I concluded my talk by saying that maybe the ambient temperature is perfect. Maybe the geopolitical or diplomatic temperature is just right for germination to take place, for a Tista Treaty to actually go, to be proposed and actually make its way to a negotiating table. It is actually practical to take the Ganga Water Treaty that is up for renegotiation in 2026, and maybe, as Professor Asif suggested, make it a lifetime treaty, and with provisos that we will keep with data sharing, with aspects, because the climate is not going to remain the same. So every year, every 2 years, revisit the treaty. And so I think these matters have been concluded, ironically, within India. But they have not been necessarily applied between the countries with which India shares rivers, and vice versa. So I think if there is a lesson in this, maybe India needs to look at itself, and maybe the neighboring countries of India, the upper riparian countries like Nepal and the lower like Bangladesh, can point to India saying, look, you guys have done it already. What's the problem? Why not do it with us?
Farapa.
Sophia, this is for you. The Mekong Delta Commission and that example has been floating for over 10 years, or 15 years, I think, as long as I've been trying to have these conversations around rights of the rivers, water sharing, and so on. What do you think stops the Bangladesh government or Bangladesh and India to adopt this in this case? So, because going back to what Professor Imtiaz says, that it has to be profitable for the political actors. So what is it that's stopping? And Sudeep, you gave examples of within India, and then that's why I jumped in and talked about the Indus Treaty. So basically, the the solution comes only when there's a greater interest, and that's economic interest, or or geopolitics. Yeah, because you ended by saying that this is the opportune moment given the role of China in the region, and the Western countries and so on. So I totally agree. If I'm a Machiavellian and I'm a politician, I would definitely take that opportunity. So I find that interesting. But my question was to Sophia.
Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Farah. I'm from GSCC. So I have a question to Dr. Sufia. Thank you so much for your presentation. So we have seen the fact of hydro diplomacy and climate diplomacy, but in terms of Bangladesh, we often see that these negotiations take place in silos. They are not always together and advocate together. So what steps can we take that we take this more in an inclusive way and make it to the global level? Thank you.
Thank you, Farapa, for the question. To Faraz, thank you for the questions. So I just, Appa, I'm very much agree with you, and I just want to mention here that maybe we are failure to make understand that this is very profitable, because this is the new discourse. If you see that in the hydro diplomacy, that water, food, energy nexus and the connectivity nexus, we are trying to, trade off this water negotiation with the other, like inland water transportation. It may be biodiversity conservation, or it may be the offer for the other business. So we need to trade off. We need to find out that which is very much beneficial for the all of the region. And I think we have lack of studies on that how can we make it beneficial for the whole region, that each and every country will be benefited through this regional cooperation. I think we need to find out the way that how we all can be benefited from the the regional approach or regional cooperation. And for the hydro diplomacy and climate diplomacy, yes, there are some of the ministries, like I can mention here, that within the country that we are not actually, we don't know that what the other ministry or the other department is doing. Like, say, for example, like the energy department is not connected with the climate diplomacy or the, the other type of diplomatic initiative or the cooperation. So within the country, there are a lot of, there are lack of cooperation within the department, within the ministry. So I think we need to cooperate. We need to share the information. We need to work together. And there is another loopholes is there, because there is a gap between the scientists and the policymakers. So it is obvious that the policymakers sometimes don't listen to the scientists. So it is also there. So I think this needs a holistic approach.
Yeah, please.
Just as a response to... No, I can't, of course, because your question is irresistible. So, or your point was irresistible. How can I resist? Yeah, very briefly. Come on. The thing is that I think, again, responding as much to you as to you, is that I think the time for trading off geoeconomics with the climate crisis and the river waters and geopolitics is over. Because river, water, climate, productivity, food security are the bedrock securities on which we now understand much better that countries, on the basis of which countries now live and die. I think we are well past the expiry date for negotiating about what to be trade off. Do we go with trade negotiations first and keep the water negotiations later? Or do we go with the visa issues or the border issues first and we go with agrarian issues later, or climate crisis collaboration later? I think it all needs to work in tandem, because it all collectively adds up to security in a 360-degree holistic sense. It is total security, including climate security, geopolitical security, energy security, and foreign policy security, and therefore domestic policy security. So I think we're well past the time that we need to look at these as different strands. It needs to be a unitary strand. And I think that's the negotiating platform from which every country should be negotiating.
Thank you. We will take the last two questions. I can see one hand. If he's not asking two questions, then there is a scope for one more question. If not, just listen to.
Thank you. I'm Zayed from ISEC in Bangladesh. So I would like to know from Dr. Sophia that you talked about during monsoon, like rainy season, Farakka has to be open, right? So if it has to be open, and during monsoon we don't need water, to be honest. But if it has to be open, those areas will be flooded. So I'd like to know this: is there any solution or not? If no, so is that our person to be oppressed or suppressed by India? Thank you.
There is a popular saying that you can't change your neighbors. So it's better to stay with them. Yeah? So because that is the structural problem of the Farakka barrage. So any engineer will talk about that. So what is planning, like with India and Bangladesh, they are planning to build actually another barrage within the Bangladesh side so that we cannot get flooded. But still it is under, the planning phase. So maybe that can reduce, or we can actually, this is actually still in the planning phase. So I think the proper authority can give you the proper information about that. But it is still in the mind of like Bangladesh and Indian government. They are also thinking about building another Farakka barrage inside Bangladesh to resolve this problem. It can be solved, it can be minimized, but you have to recognize the water flow, the water pressure due to the climate change, the flow rate will be increased, So you have to consider that, but still it is in the planning phase, so far I know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. We have some, some fantastic ideas and interest and concepts, actually, those who have been explored over the last hour or so. But we are running behind. Actually, we are 15 minutes behind our scheduled time. So I would like to conclude. Before I conclude it, I would like to give 1 minute to each of my panelists. And if Razmi Farooq is still online, she can also join in. So I start with Sudeep. Would you like to say?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things that, and I will just reiterate the point that I made, I hope repeatedly, and I will do so one last time, is about intent and is about attitude, the change of attitude and intent, which is brought about by realpolitik in the world at large. So in our case, of course, it's the realpolitik of South Asia. And I think we need to keep that in mind when we get to the negotiating table. I know I'm repeating myself, but I want to underscore this point because I can't stress it enough. And I don't want to end in a dark and foreboding manner, but in a sort of in a hopeful manner and also in a light-hearted manner. I'm actually quite surprised that India and Bangladesh both have the Ministry of Water Resources, right? But in the Indian case in 2019, the Water Resources Ministry was renamed to Jal Shakti. It was, the water power, to translate it literally. I think that is a bit of a foreboding or a foreshadowing of muscularity or muscular policy or politics, which unfortunately has crept into the Indian political situation right now. So I sincerely wish that attitude will drive us to not look at Jal Shakti, but look at water resources, not look at water power, but look at water resources. And I think that kind of grammar that has crept into South Asian dialogue needs to be dialed down, it needs to be toned down, it needs to be far more proactive, far more palliative, and far more solution-driven.
Very quickly, Razmi, would you like to share something the last 1 minute or so? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I think what I've understood, and I've learned a lot from our panelists, is really, the complexity of the situation. I mean, even in one country, let alone regionally. I think from our perspective as ActionAid International, we can only continue to ensure that the commitment and momentum is maintained and that we engage in the right processes. And I really commend everyone for coming together. I think this is really important that we bring our minds and heads together, that passion and commitment is there, that we continue to revisit issues because the context is changing rapidly. But that we also find ways of really, in a structured way, prioritizing and planning on what are the major blocks and opportunities, and how can we work together to achieve more collective success on these issues. So yeah, maybe trying to ground into the realities of next steps and concrete outcomes that will really help us to move the agenda forward. But a huge kudos to everyone involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Sufia?
Thank you all for their wonderful observation. I just want to, for the last word, that we need to do a lot of homeworks. Before any negotiation, any diplomacy, anything, any regional cooperation, we need to do a lot of homeworks. We are lag behind of it. We don't have enough studies. So whatever capacity we have at the individual level or the community level or at the organization level, we need to do a lot of homeworks and a lot of studies. With this, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you to all our three panelists for their fantastic contribution. And of course, we have got kind of a homework from Dr. Sufia to work on. We have heard so many words, inclusive hydrodiplomacy. We need to change our attitude. We need to bring in other diplomacy, energy, and connectivity business, everything together. So thank you all very much. We have another session to start very soon. And I hope that you will be staying back for the concluding session as well later on. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the enlightening session. There's going to be a group photo session. And meanwhile, I'd like to let you know that we are moving towards our concluding session. And yeah, the 10th one. Okay, so for this session, and I bet this is going to be a very interesting one, let's embark on this session. This session shall also be followed by a question-answer session. Over to you, Appa.
Thank you, Sumaya. And apologies to our friends online that we are running behind time. But the last session was provoking people and getting more responses and action. So that's wonderful. And so this, usually when we think about a museum, we think about dinosaurs or artifacts that are outdated and so on. But in the water sector, somehow over the last, 15 years, there's been more movement to try and make the water museum a living museum. It's a museum, for instance, in Bangladesh, we created the water museum with the community. So it's not in the capital, it's not stuck in a building, it doesn't have fossils in there, but it's got artifacts, it's got stories, it's got different publications that came from the people living with water, people living around water. And we wanted to create this museum also as a space where the community, young people, students could learn about water, river, exactly what has been happening the last 2 days around what is the treaty, what are the conventions, demystify, because often they feel that they're being deprived or the water sharing is not happening. They don't understand why there's more water at some points in the year and then why the rivers are drying up. So there were a lot of things that actually got us into creating this water museum in Kuakata, Pakimara. But as a result of that, it opened us and brought new friends. We got to meet Sarah, we got to meet Heriberto, and a lot of others, and learned that there's a huge network. There's a world museum network, and they are doing so many interesting and enterprise.
Okay, but I can't hear or see you or the room.
Oh,
So,
okay. Colleagues, can you do something about it? And also I have Commodore Asbar with me.
can you see that? Yeah. So, hi everyone. Good afternoon. I don't know how you introduced me, Farah, but the last thing I heard you say was law. And unfortunately, I'm not a lawyer. I've been an academic and a researcher for many years around equity issues around water and gender and governance. And it's from that work that this Living Waters Museum story started. So some of these slides, some of on water, where we want future generations and young people to understand water from this multidimensional lens, rooted in history, but also looking at adaptation, looking at equity, looking at water justice in the context also of climate change. So what does all this mean? You know, what does the water we drink every day or we take for granted, what does it mean for different people, whether you're indigenous communities, marginalized women, policymakers, you know, people building dams, etc. What is this new vision that we can have on water? So in India, we still don't have any meaningful national water museum, or we have one or two small physical museums, but I initiated Living Waters Museum in 2017 as an initiative to work with young people to develop these visual stories around our water heritage, built heritage, natural and intangible or cultural heritage around water. And I wanted the stories to create a repository, like an archive. So now we have well over 100 such stories in the last 6 years. And I'll talk a little bit about the work that we do as a virtual museum engaging with local communities, because to me, even if you're a virtual museum, even if you're an online repository, you can't really call yourself a museum unless you have a pathway towards engagement. And we do that in many ways, but this is just very quickly how we build our content in terms of collaborations with schools, with academic institutions, with NGOs, with artists and activists across the country, using music, storytelling, dance, and of course, interactive media. So just a glimpse of some of the content, you know, working with students from the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad to look at stepwells. Now, many of you will know what stepwells are, and that you know that in India from the 13th, 14th century, they started building these marvelous structures. They were examples also of hydrophilanthropy to provide water to local communities. And many of the stepwells stretched in a line across western to northern India, right up into Central Asia, but not as elaborate over there as the ones you find in Gujarat and Rajasthan even now. So in this story is a fictional storyboard about a little girl who's searching for water in Ahmedabad in 2050 and falls down one such well and comes across a community that is suffering because their water from their village is being pushed upwards by these taps that are sucking water from the aquifer up towards urbanization and modernization and development. So in order to find her way out of the well, she has to find a way of turning these taps off and ensuring that there is access to water for all. So the story is about that and how this girl negotiates her way out of that. So it was designed as a storyboard for an interactive video game. So that's one of the pieces. And then, of course, we've done many of these things, taking children to heritage places. This is Sarkej Rosa, a beautiful mausoleum site in Ahmedabad where there's a whole history around the Sufi saint who came over here and set up this place, the kings and queens that are laid to rest over here, the kind of water cooling system through the jollies in the back, the windows, and then taking children also down a step well in a village near, where these kids lived, but they had never really gone into the step well or seen what was there. We've also worked with many physical museums talking about the history and the culture of water utensils. This is one man's private collection of all sorts of amazing pots that tell stories of women's work and men's labor as well. But also they talk about the water embedded in the food we eat, what we call virtual water. So when you're eating something, it's not just the water you're using for boiling or to cook it, but how do you trace that? So again, this was an exhibition developed by a student from the same NID Institute way back about 5 years ago, and it's really done very well. And we've given the panels back to the museum so that their space is a little more lively. We've worked with indigenous communities across Northeast India with adolescent girls during the COVID pandemic lockdown, because there was a feeling that village elders were dying from COVID. This was before the vaccine, and obviously even after the vaccine, but we wanted to capture these stories. We wanted young girls in particular to talk to their grandparents and their village elders and discover, what were the stories behind the rivers like the Teesta in the picture, which flowed through their villages, and many other things. And the girls did these amazing online workshops, art therapy and psychoanalysis based. And then they spent some time creating their art, whether it was to weave or write poetry or make a short film, an interview with one of their grandparents, paint. They did a lot of things, and this exhibition again was curated, and it's available online on the museum, I think. Well, anyway, I'll share the museum URL after this presentation. During COVID, we obviously didn't shut down. We became even more busy, and we started looking at water heritage in urban spaces right up to public health, because a lot of the messaging around COVID was around, hand washing. And we wanted to understand that how do poor communities in urban areas, what access to water do they have for this continuous hand washing and, 3 minutes and so forth that was being shared with us. So we came together with architects and researchers, artists, photographers, and students in Bombay to curate the first of these exhibitions, Confluence, which you can see online. Actually, sorry, that URL is wrong. It's now on livingwatersmuseum.org, so I'll change that afterwards. And then, things like engaging with community. So this is an organization called, I think, the Coastal Conservation Foundation, and they did this interactive diagram where if you click on each of these dots, you will see opening up a little film or an image and a story on a creature that lives either on the shoreline or the intertidal zone between the beach and the ocean. And many of us who live in Mumbai don't really know much about these little creatures that live below our feet virtually. So the idea was to bring that to kids. And an organization like this now, when the world started opening up, they continued with a lot of their walks that they do along beaches every week, taking kids and adults over there. Working with activist groups like the Pani Haq Andolan, which has worked for the rights of informal migrant communities, again in Bombay, to access piped water systems. And they fought a court case for many years once the UN declared access to water as a basic fundamental human right in 2010. So we worked with the Pani Haq Samiti as well in this mega exhibition, and they made an amazing calendar available online of milestones around water and access to water. We did something similar in Pune, where I currently live, and I'm based as an adjunct professor at ISA, the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. So Pune is obviously a much smaller place, but we again worked with NGOs and schools and educators and academics at the Institute also to curate stories around water. And we decided that we wanted to take those stories and look at our, what are children taught in school around water. So we had this amazing opportunity through a grant from Global Challenges UK on transforming education for sustainable futures. And we were able to, again, work in a collective with academics and NGOs and test these 16 lesson plans that we had developed, which were really game-based, workshop-based around water with 6 schools in Pune, and children from all sorts of economic backgrounds were at these schools. So I'm really happy with the outcome. It was led by my colleague, Dr. Chavi Mathur, herself a scientist interested in museums. And now we've got a larger grant from the EU, and we're hoping to take this kind of approach to interactive, play-based education to one of our museum partners in Burkina Faso in West Africa, which does a lot of educational work with kids over there in their villages and communities. But we're hoping that if we can help work with them in digitizing some of these lessons, then maybe we can, scale it up to other countries in Africa and not only depend on physical interaction. So that's something that built from this, looking at water from myself and water, shared waters, water systems and sustainabilities, and water and our planet. This was the kind of 4 large modules that we had worked on. So, and again, in this thing, access to water was really important in terms of our learning outcomes as well, looking and seeing how children looked at issues of access and equity. And we played games on this. There's something called the privilege game on water as well, and I won't go into all of this now. We've worked with a museum in Jodhpur in Rajasthan, the Mehranga Fort, and helped them work through their archives and build a very visual and interactive story on water in Jodhpur from the past to the present, and also look at the work of people like Karen Ronsley, an Irish guy who has made Jodhpur his home and spends his days cleaning up stepwells like this. So bringing Karen's story to children through graphic art. Sorry, if I'm running out of time, please tell me, Farah. Yeah?
A little bit. What I was hoping also that you've given us a teaser of all the different kind of museums, but if you could just say a few words about how you advocated and lobbied and how now every state needs to have a museum, something in those lines? The advocacy, policy, influencing work that you've done a little bit, so that we can be,
okay.
We're trying to get this in our part of the world as well.
Okay, let me get to that because there isn't really much happening there, Farah, but I'll just finish. I mean, this is what we've done for Calcutta. This exhibition is also live right now, which would be of interest to you all because it's in English and Bengali. And this was another grant that we had with the American Consulate in Calcutta to work in the Sundarbans. And I think my colleague came last year and spoke about this project, so I won't go into it. Yeah, let me finish this thing. And I think I'm not going to say more about this right now because I'm going to stop the... So as to, policy advocacy work on museums, Farah, it's not been very encouraging. We we had a workshop with the Indian government in 2019 before COVID to plan for a national water museum. And, after that, it's really come back to the drawing board. We've had plans for a museum on the Sabarmati in Ahmedabad. But Mansi, whom you know quite well, has been working with the UP government for some time to get a land sanctioned now for a water museum in Mathura. But that will tell the story of Krishna and the various kunds over there, the various wells over there, and how, his journey went across. So I'm not sure how much I want to get engaged with something like that. But it is difficult. I mean, it is part of the policy, but it's not really being taken up. So the ministry, the Jal Shakti, also wanted to create a virtual museum for children on a similar thing to what we've done with our water classrooms, and I was part of that expert committee. But again, with anything with the government, it just lies mired in bureaucracy, unfortunately. So even that hasn't really taken up.
So, is there a
as far as
policy
policy
that?
advocacy goes, I don't think we're doing very much.
So, did I misunderstand, or is there a policy that says that all the states need to have a living museum, or a directive, or a?
No, there isn't a policy.
Okay, that's fine. I, for some reason,
Yeah, there was a directive before COVID. Yeah. This must have been something you heard from Mansi, I think.
Right, Mansi is here and she's responsible for that. No, but Sarah, she has really dedicated the last so many years to museum and water museum and living museum that she's been an inspiration. I'm sorry, I said law. What I meant was environment and sociology was her background. But we have the people from the community also listening. আমি জানি না আপনারা খেয়াল করেছেন কি দেখেছেন কি না, কিন্তু আমাদের সারা আপা যেটা দেখালো যে ওনাদের দেশে বিভিন্ন রকম মিউজিয়াম করেছে, এমনকি কোভিডের সময় যে হাত ধোয়ার পানি, এটাকে নিয়েও কিন্তু তারা এক ধরনের গল্প তৈরি করেছে এবং তারা তাদের মিউজিয়ামে গল্পটা দেখাচ্ছে। সো আপনারা পাখিমারায় বসে হয়তো আমরা অ্যাকশন এইডের উদ্যোগে এই জাদুঘর হয়েছে এতদিন, এবং আগামীতেও অ্যাকশন এইডের উদ্যোগেই থাকবে, কিন্তু আপনারা নিজেরাও ছোট ছোট কিছু উদ্যোগ নিতে পারেন। আমার মনে হয় যদি স্যারের কথাটা শুনে থাকেন, ওরা শিশুদের নিয়ে গল্প করেছে, এখন কথা বলার সুযোগ নাই, এখন কথা বলার সুযোগ নেই, আমি শুধু শোনার জন্য বলছি, কেন এরপরে আমাদের আরেকজন প্রবন্ধ পাঠ করবেন, উনি আবার ইটলি থেকে। So thank you, Sarah. We'll come back with questions if there are questions. And I know you also have to leave. So may I now invite Edo Brichete? Did I pronounce your name right? And he's from Italy, Eco Museum. He wants to talk about why an eco museum. So over to you, Edo.
Okay.
Do you have slides?
Yeah, pardon? No, I've got some slides. I'll share my screen.
Okay.
But first of all, I think that you are exhausted, because this is the last intervention. Special greetings from Italy, hearty greetings, and to Sarah, a special one. Okay. Well, I think that all of us say that water is decisive in the climate challenge. But how do we treat it? Is it something only, reserved to experts, or it is something related to local communities and to their heritage? This is important because heritage means something you should transmit to next generations. So don't forget that water is the second element present on Earth. Leonardo da Vinci just said this. Well, I'm presenting just what is a cultural formula. there are more than 100 eco-museums in Italy. They just work for, I've been working for 50 years, but relatively, it is something new. Because if local communities don't use it, I think that all the efforts in preserving our natural and anthropic environment should be quite useless. So I'm going to share my screen. Just a moment. There is, okay, condividi. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, we see it, but it's a very small font. If there's a possibility to enlarge it,
I'm going to enlarge it.
put it on slideshow.
Okay.
Yeah, now it's on slideshow. Done. Thank you. So you're talking about the
Yes.
Eco Museum.
Okay. Allora, what is an eco-museum and why it is useful? Because if we do not involve local communities, I think that we won't go on much. Well, first of all, what is an eco-museum? I think that the title of your 10th section is just based on the community-based, involvement and measures. And I think this is quite right. That is the core of a problem. So what is an eco-museum? First of all, it's a cultural institution, which is not a static, a cultural institution, but it's in continuous evolution. It's a tool for studying the present, comparing it with the past, planning its future steps. It's an agreement for the development and well-being of the community. So that implies an evolutionary approach to involve the local community. Why? And which way? Because if you don't share cultural assets for common goals, interests, you do not involve local community. Because a community sometimes doesn't know where waters come from and from where waters come from and where they go on. So we have to let community know, and a cultural eco-museum is a service which is played on a sustainable scale. We have to focus on the local community because the local community is an active, social, and responsible subject. If the community doesn't feel that is its heritage, they couldn't be responsible. So water, which is the second element, is present in all kinds of environments, but it's something which is not treated and considered as it is worth. So we have to give value to, above all, young people. We have to weave intergenerational relationships. Because if the adults don't understand this, I think that a step would be over. We have to focus on tangible, something you can touch, memory, technical knowledge. We have to involve even the landscape as a term for comparison, because heritage should be transmitted. If you don't transmit it, that is something which is going to die. So, eco-museum heritage is based on what? First, the dominance, which are the themes. There are all kinds of themes. which are related to work, to life, to story, to the faith, to the everything which can recall us of the importance of all our richness, territorial richness. And so we have to plan some itineraries just to move the people to know the themes and to know the area. And water is an important part of the area. And what can we do? We can just organize, hearings from community. We should know what community thinks, what is important to do. And so a formidable instrument is the maps of community to mark the transition to an overall vision of reality, which is based not anymore on the monuments, blah, blah, but on the feelings of people and above all their expectations. So maps of community give us the real situation of what community and people think about it, what is their feeling, and above all, their expectations. So what do a community expect from us and to do about? Leonardo da Vinci, said that all our cognition begins with feelings. So we should feel our environment more than see it. Because if we don't think it is our heritage, we probably don't do anything. And so this is important not only for local communities, but even for the stakeholders, which are economic actors, to invest in it, to do green jobs. But above all, we should talk to the policy makers. But you know that policy makers move on when they are urged to do that by whom? The local communities. So the map of community is something useful to give us the sensation of the transformations over time. And they give us the collective heritage which should be preserved and enhanced. So map of community is a process which is virtuous of rendering, is the result of a process, not the result of an action, which starts from geographical environment contextualization, but considers the knowledge of it and representation of it in a more dynamic way, which starts from the past, lives in the present, and looks at the future. It is not the product of the map that is important, but rather it's in construction progress. So there are more than many examples of how to represent the territory. This, for example, is connected to a village in the mountains. The village was not, conscious of what is its heritage. So starting from the past, from the technical knowledge, the moral knowledge, and so on, they understood from which point they started, and so they consider if that heritage is still working and where to go later. So the museums, I'm going to finish, don't worry, concludes a journey of awareness. As I took this, say from John Steinbeck, people don't make a journey. It's the journey which makes people. And I think this is very important. So it is not important to make a journey, but it is very important to understand and to learn from journey. An ecomuseum is a cultural journey. I've just finished. Just I concluded. Okay, that's it.
Thank you so much, Edo. And it resonates a lot with me and with ActionAid Bangladesh, because when we thought of developing the Water Museum, it was about the journey, it was about the process, it was about it's the emotions and the feelings, and that's why instead of trying to do something in the capital, we went all the way to the community in a very remote area, because that's where we were engaged, and also how people were living around the water. Now I'm going to bring in Commodore Asber, and you people must be thinking, what role does he have? I think he's in a very unique position as as he chairs the Cox's Bazar Development Authority, that this is where you can bring in the Living Museum. This is where you can take initiatives which no one has taken. And I hope you've been inspired by listening to the different presentations. So over to you.
Respected organizer of this wonderful conference on the broad theme of river, water and climate change, creating space for resilience. The respected Mrs. Farah Kobir, Country Director of ActionAid, and other distinguished presenters here, and respected audience. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. I know it was a very hectic session, 2 days session. You have been listening for since the morning, and yesterday also you have listened. So I will try to be as brief as possible. But at the very outset, let me express my heartfelt gratitude and thanks to Ms. Farah Kobir of ActionAid for inviting me and to be the part of this wonderful galaxy of the people who were devoted, who has devoted these 2 days for the greater cause of the humanity and for the significantly for the survivability and for sustainability of our country. Ladies and gentlemen, water is life, and without no life is possible without water. That's why our Mother Earth is the only planet where life is possible, where human is living. Neither it is the moon, nor the Mars, nor any other galaxy or any other celestial object in the distant sky which accommodates life. So water is very important. 70% of the earth is covered with water, but out of that only 0.5% is the drinking water. That's why one of the, I think, I don't know exactly, his name is Mr. Khobiruddin. He has very succinctly said, and I will tell in Bangla, that এই পৃথিবীর চার ভাগের 3 ভাগ পানি, বিষয়টা আমরা সবাই জানি। তবুও পানির জন্য প্রতিদিনের হাহাকার, পানির জন্য জীবন যায় বারবার। সাগর মহাসাগর সবই অথই পানির আধার। এক বিন্দু পানিও নাই সেথায় মানুষের খাবার। That means you see, we have abundant of the water. 70% of the earth is comprising of the water, but lot of seas, lot of oceans, but there is no single drop of water which you can consume. So such is the overarching importance of the water resources for the survival of the humanity. Again, when we consider water in a broader sense, in terms of its use in agriculture, in industry, for human habitat, for urbanization, etc., water bodies and water-related resources forms the lifeline of our civilizational growth and development. And that's why sometimes we say, if there is a magic on the planet, it is contained in water only. And in fact, water is the driving force of all nature. Now, ladies and gentlemen, climate is changing. Earth's temperature is increasing, and this is affecting the hydrological cycle. It's increasing the intensity and frequency of natural disasters. Out of all these natural disasters, 90% is related to water. You may talk about cyclone, storm, flood, drought, or for example, the wildfire, etc. And almost $18 billion is lost every year due to this. And you'll be surprised to know 2 billion people are facing high water stresses. Water scarcity in some places will dislodge about 700 million people in future. And climate change will push 132 million people in poverty. Hence, we need to have a renewed, urgent, and creative approach towards management of water resources of our earth. In this backdrop, I believe emergence of the global network of water museums, which is commonly known as WAMU Net, was a flagship initiative and a game changer for all of us. Intergovernmental Hydrological Program of UNESCO endorsed it in 2018 to promote water awareness and sustainability education worldwide. This WMO net is now reconnecting people with all forms of water legacy, both natural and heritage, cultural heritage, taking a holistic approach encompassing the natural, social, cultural, artistic, and as we have been discussing today, spiritual aspect. If I am not wrong, already more than 30 countries has established water museums. And I must confess one thing, because for the last night I was just Googling about this, and I was very moved to see that Bangladesh is sitting there in the list. And credit goes to Ms. Farah Kobir, because she has established a water museum in Bangladesh in Kuakata, and she made us proud by proving that Bangladesh is also a responsible member of the world community. So a big hand of applause for her. Ladies and gentlemen, ActionAid is playing a wonderful role in Cox's Bazar. As I am the chairman of Cox's Bazar Development Authority, I know, and already ActionAid has owned the hearts and minds of Cox's Bazar. And most significantly, an ActionAid is successful in inspiring Cox's Bazar Development Authority to think on water management with a new prism of focus and for a paradigm shift in our development thinking. Now coming to Cox's Bazar, I will just try to highlight few points. At this moment, for example, Cox's Bazar is a wonderful place and is poised for opening up new vistas of opportunity for Bangladesh. And it's very much important, I think, for strategic decision making in Bangladesh. First of all, as you know, for example, in terms of economy, Bangladesh's over-reliance on garbage industry, on overseas employment, sometimes proves to be a little bit challenging, because if there's any disruption in the supply chain in the world, it hampers us. So we need new, areas for economic opportunity. Cox's Bazar is there for promotion of tourism, for promotion of blue economy. Leaving aside such a big Bay of Bengal, you're not thinking about blue economy. So it is you can use that water for your purpose. And you see, this unique opportunity can, contribute to the development of the country. Then my second point, it is with regard to the climate change. Cox's Bazar is considered to be the ground zero for climate change in terms of salinity intrusion, sea level rise, and so on. So I think we need to have a integrated, all this, the climate resilience should be integrated in all our development thinking. So third point is that as a coastal area, we need to have a different development paradigm. Cox's Bazar is not like Dhaka. Cox's Bazar is not like Rajshahi, or for that matter like Khulna. It's not like the Haur areas of Sylhet or hilly place of Chittagong Hill Tract. It's a coastal area. For coastal area, you need to have an integrated approach, which is called integrated coastal zone management concept. And there, for example, the water surface, water bodies, here, these resources, we have to be focus on these very delicately and very meticulously. And my fourth point, fourth point is that balancing between development spree and biodiversity conservation imperatives. For example, lot of projects is going on in Cox's Bazar, in Matarbari, in Shonadia, in other places. But every development has got a cost. So you need to focus on biodiversity so that we can conserve these water spaces. My fifth point is we have to explore the fourth industrial revolution, opportunity of fourth industrial revolution, and we have to think about the moving towards the renewable energy. And sixth point is enhancing the civic facilities. For example, in case of Cox's Bazar, people are over-exploiting the groundwater. They are irresponsibly dumping the polluted water at sea, in the rivers. So I think you have to think about the water treatment, about the sewage treatment plant, about the access of water, and about a creative approach for conserving the water of hilly aquifers. I remember when I was a boy, I used to visit some villages. They did not have the water supply, neither they had the deep well. What they used to do, they used to collect the water from the hill through the bamboos, and they used to use that for cooking and sometimes for even drinking. And the last point is with regard to the geopolitical issues and Rohingya crisis. I will not elaborate here. My message is that all these development issues and demographic challenges is making it imperative that we in Cox's Bazar critically think about our rivers, our water, our climate change related challenges, and we need to find ways and means so that we can create space for resilience. So Cox's Bazar, for that reason, I have got few recommendations. For example, we have to have a massive awareness creation involving the community, youth-led programs, media campaign, then similar other programs. Second recommendation is that already, our respected professor from Italy, he was also mentioning about the mapping of the uniqueness of Cox's Bazar, mapping, community mapping. Because Cox's Bazar being located in the wonderful picturesqueness of the nature is, blended on one side by hilly terrain, on the other side, the coastal belt. Then there's a mix of urban and rural setup. Then there is a permanent settlers and displaced people from Myanmar and other places. And on one side, there's an interaction with the river. On the other side, there's interaction with the hill. On the other side, there's interaction with the, Bay of Bengal. And so, there's a lot of diversity in terms of livelihood. There's a lot of diversity in terms of, people mindset. And here is also, the legacy also, or heritage also is different. So we have to have a total mapping so that we can think what type of water museum, what type of thing we can establish. And research is important. Without research, we can, based on research, based on mapping, Cox's Bazar Development Authority, and inshallah, with the help of Action Aid, we will think to establish a water museum in Cox's Bazar. And of course, interagency coordination is very important, because at the policy making level, if we do not sensitize them, then we cannot achieve our aim. And when I myself, for example, came across the word water museum very lately from hearing it from Ms. Farah Kabir. So I think awareness building and sensitizing the policymaker is also very, very important. And lastly, I would say that aggressive policy advocacy is required. Aggressive policy advocacy. Here, what we will do, how we can go about, that we'll find out, and we'll definitely cooperate with the ActionAid and other like-minded NGOs. So these are all things in very short. To conclude, I would say that this type of conference and seminars are indeed very important, because our policymakers should know these things. Sometimes scientists, scholars, activists, they are fighting for cause, fighting with some agenda, but those are sitting in the, the chairs, those are formulating the policy, they must come on board. So with this, I will conclude my session. And once again, from the bottom of my heart, I express my heartfelt gratitude to Ms. Farah Kabari, to ActionAid for inviting me and to make me the part of this wonderful galaxy of the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Commodore Asbar. I hope that my friends Sarah and Edo were able to influence you. So what we're going to do is we're not going to bring a closure to this session, because I know Sarah has to leave at 3:30, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to invite Professor Imtiaz Ahmed to come, and so this session will slowly move into the concluding session. And before and we have online the ambassador of Bangladesh to the Netherlands, Riaz Hamidullah. And Riaz, can you hear me? I hope you can hear me. Riaz has also been very active in terms of looking at water and bilateral and water and diplomacy. So I hope you've caught some of the presentations, and he's been working with Netherlands, both with the government and non-government, to look at how to promote more collective action. And Edo, you were mentioning about mapping and heritage and narratives. I don't know if you can see, but we have these two publications. One was The People of Many Rivers. Those were really stories from different people. And then there was one on rivers and rights. So maybe we can send you some of this. Now, as we are coming to the closure, there's a lot of takeaway points. Will you give me enough time to show a 4-minute video on the Kolapara Museum? You can be here with us for 4 minutes. I can be here for 4 minutes. And then you can speak? Okay, so shall we show the video to everyone? This is on the Water Museum in Kuakata. It's like a travel log, and we have a young person traveling through this.
আমি সোহানুর রহমান, আমি একজন জলবায়ু কর্মী। আমি কাজ করি পরিবেশের স্বার্থে। কাজের জন্য আমাকে দেশ ও বিদেশের বিভিন্ন জায়গায় ঘুরতে হয় এবং আমি তা পছন্দও করি। আর আজকে আমি চলে এসেছি কুয়াকাটা সমুদ্র সৈকতে। তবে আজকে আমি আপনাদেরকে একটি ভিন্ন জায়গায় নিয়ে যাব। আজকে আমরা যাচ্ছি দেশের একমাত্র এবং দক্ষিণ এশিয়ার সর্বপ্রথম পানি জাদুঘর। তবে সেখানে যাওয়ার আগে আমাদের এই সফরের যিনি সঙ্গী হচ্ছেন তার সঙ্গে পরিচয় করিয়ে দিচ্ছি। তিনি হচ্ছেন টুম্পা।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম, আমার নাম হচ্ছে ময়ূর আক্তার টুম্পা। আমিও একজন জলবায়ু কর্মী। আর আজকে আমি সোহান ভাইয়ের সাথে পানি জাদুঘরটি দেখতে যাওয়ার জন্য খুবই উচ্ছ্বাসিত।
আজকের সফরকে নিয়ে আমরা দুজনেই অনেক বেশি এক্সাইটেড। কেন এত বেশি এক্সাইটমেন্ট জানতে হলে শেষ পর্যন্ত আমাদের সঙ্গেই থাকুন। আমরা চলে এসেছি আমাদের ডেস্টিনেশনে। আপনাদের সুবিধার জন্য জানিয়ে রাখতে চাই, এই পানি জাদুঘরটি পটুয়াখালী সদর এবং সাগরকন্যা কুয়াকাটার মাঝামাঝি কলাপাড়ার পাখিমারা এলাকায় অবস্থিত। তো টুম্পা, চলুন যাওয়া যাক।
আরে এটা কি? এই নৌকাটা এইভাবে বালির উপরে আর ইটের দেয়াল দিয়ে ঘেরাও কেন?
এটা আপাতত অজানাই থাক, আমি উত্তরটা তোমাকে পরে বলবো। চলো টিকিট কেটে ভিতরে যাওয়া যাক।
আচ্ছা চলেন ঘুরে আসি।
জানো, এই মিউজিয়ামের অনেকগুলো বিশেষত্বের মধ্যে একটা বড় বিশেষত্ব হচ্ছে এখানে প্রায় 85টি নদীর পানি সংরক্ষণ করা হয়েছে, যার মধ্যে আমাদের দেশীয় নদী, বিদেশি নদী এবং আমাদের আন্তঃসীমান্তের নদীর পানিও এখানে সংরক্ষণ করা হয়েছে।
কিন্তু ভাইয়া, আমাদের বাংলাদেশ তো নদীমাতৃক দেশ, তাহলে আমাদের কেন নদীর পানিগুলো সংরক্ষণ করা লাগবে?
সেটা ঠিক যে বাংলাদেশ নদীমাতৃক দেশ, কিন্তু নানান কারণে যেভাবে নদী মরে গেছে এবং মরে যাচ্ছে, তাতে হয়তো একদিন নদীই থাকবে না। সো আমাদের যদি পানি সম্পর্কে বা নদী সম্পর্কে ধারণা নিতে হয়, তখন এই ধরনের মিউজিয়ামে যেতে হতে পারে আমাদেরকে। এই যে দেখো, এটা হচ্ছে মাটির ম্যাপ। এখানে পটুয়াখালী জেলার কলাপাড়া উপজেলার সব নদ নদীগুলোকে তুলে ধরা হয়েছে। আমরা রয়েছি ঠিক এখানটায়, যার পাশ দিয়ে বয়ে গেছে আন্ধারমানিক নদী এবং তার শাখা উপশাখাগুলো। কিন্তু আমাদের অবহেলার কারণে এর অনেকগুলো শাখা উপশাখাই আজ মৃতপ্রায়। আর তুমি তো জানোই, যেমন দূষণ, অপরিকল্পিত ব্যবস্থাপনা এবং ভরাটের কারণে অনেকগুলো নদী এখন মরে যাচ্ছে। আচ্ছা টুম্পা, বলো তো, এই মিউজিয়াম থেকে সাগরকন্যা কুয়াকাটায় যেতে আমাদের কোন দুইটি নদী পেরোতে হয়?
আমি আসার পথে তো দেখেছি সোহান ভাই, আমি যদি এখন মিউজিয়াম থেকে সাগরকন্যা যাই, প্রথমে আমার পথে সোনাতলা নদী এবং দ্বিতীয় যে নদীটি আছে সেটা হচ্ছে খাপড়াভাঙা নদী। এদিকে দেখেন সোহান ভাই, এদিকে মাছ ধরার কিছু সরঞ্জামাদি আছে আর কিছু মাটির জিনিস আছে, যেগুলো আজকাল দেখা যায় না, পাওয়া তো যায়ই না।
হ্যাঁ, এগুলোর অনেকটাই বিলুপ্তির পথে। একসময় গ্রাম বাংলার মানুষের এগুলোই ছিল প্রধান জীবিকা অর্জনের সরঞ্জাম। তবে আশার দিক হচ্ছে নদী রক্ষা এখন অনেকেই সোচ্চার হচ্ছে, এবং যার মধ্যে হচ্ছে অ্যাকশন এইড বাংলাদেশ, এবং তাদের উদ্যোগেই এই মিউজিয়ামটি প্রতিষ্ঠিত হয়েছে। ওই দিকটা কিছু পাবলিকেশনও আছে, চলো দেখি। এখানকার অধিকাংশ প্রকাশনাগুলোই নদী এবং নদী পাড়ের মানুষের জীবন জীবিকা কেন্দ্রিক। পর্যটকরা চাইলে আরো বেশি তথ্যের জন্য এই বইগুলো ব্যবহার করতে পারে।
হ্যাঁ, এই জাদুঘরটি আসলে একটি ভালো উদ্যোগ। আচ্ছা ভাইয়া, নিচে যে নৌকাটি দেখলাম, ওর কি কোনো ভিন্ন অর্থ আছে?
ঠিক ধরেছো, চলো তোমাকে ওই নৌকার সামনে গিয়ে বোঝাই। এই প্রদর্শনীটি মূলত আমাদের সম্ভাব্য ভবিষ্যৎকেই দেখাচ্ছে। আমাদের অবহেলা এবং অব্যবস্থাপনা যেভাবে নদীগুলোকে মেরে ফেলছে, সব নদী চরে পরিণত হচ্ছে। আর এভাবে চলতে থাকলে সব নদী চর হয়ে যাবে, তখন আর নৌকার প্রয়োজন হবে না, তখন নদী এবং নৌকা কেন্দ্রিক মানুষের জীবিকা হারিয়ে যাবে। তো এবার বলো, এখানে এসে তোমার কেমন লাগলো?
এক কথায় বলতে গেলে অসাধারণ লেগেছে আমার। আমি জানতাম এই ধরনের বিশেষ জাদুঘরগুলো এতটা মেটাফরিক এবং মিনিংফুল হয়।
ঠিক বলেছো, কুয়াকাটায় যারা ঘুরতে আসেন তাদের জন্য একটি দর্শনীয় স্থান হতে পারে এটি। এখানে আসলে তারা যেমন করে ভালো সময় কাটাতে পারবেন, পাশাপাশি তারা বাংলাদেশের নদী সম্পর্কে অনেক অজানা তথ্যও জানতে পারবেন, দেখতে পারবেন এবং বুঝতে পারবেন।
আসলেই আমরা ভুলে যাই নদীরও প্রাণ আছে এবং বেঁচে থাকার অধিকার আছে। এছাড়া আমাদের বাংলাদেশের নদ নদীকে আইনগতভাবে জীবন্ত সত্তা হিসেবে ঘোষণা করেছে, আর নদী না বাঁচলে আমরাও বাঁচবো না, এটাই শেষ কথা।
সেটাই, আমরা চাই না নদী মারা যাক। আমাদের উচিত নদীকে নদীর মতো করে বাঁচতে দেওয়া, তাহলে আমরাও বাঁচতে পারবো।
Thank you. I know it was in Bangla, so sorry Sarah, sorry Edo, but I hope you got the visual impact and saw where the museum is. Now, I've brought back Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, who's known to all of you. I don't know if Edo, he is a professor of international relations, and we have been doing this advocacy for the rights of the rivers together. Riaz, you of course know Imtiaz Bhai, so he needs no introduction, and Riaz needs no introduction. So, as we are coming to the closure of our two-day conference, Imtiaz Bhai, there's been the discussions about geopolitics, about the politics of around water, river, climate. We heard from different communities. We heard about the impacts of too much water, too little water, drought, floods, all that in the last 2 days. And then we were finishing, the session before this was about the regional politics, transboundary politics, and what needs to be done. And I think the group and the interaction was that maybe this is an opportune moment also to negotiate, given what's happening in the region, negotiate with India, with China, and so on, and then talk about bilateralism, national interest, but also trilateral, quadrilateral impacts of it. And this is really the time in our history when Nepal and India is negotiating, Bhutan and India is negotiating, Bangladesh and India. So that's the geopolitics and politics of it. Then there was the whole community base and how we need to adapt, adaptation, climate change, finances, and so on. And we are coming to a closure with the Living Museum. And you know how rich the work Sarah has been doing, you know, from 2017. They have living museums all over, and she's taking it to many other parts of the world. So all put together, because you and I started the journey way back in 2013-14, and now, what is the way forward? And then I'll bring in Riaz, because he's been doing water and hydro diplomacy.
Thank you for Riaz. I have to leave in 5 or 6 minutes. I have a meeting waiting actually very nearby, so I have to rush. Thank you to all of you, those who are still here. A couple of things, you know, we started with the museum, the water museum. The idea of having a water museum way back and still now is to change our mindset, because bulk of the museums that we have are very land centric. So we thought having a water centric museum. And I remember telling Farah that the only way I could come to South, because she wanted to show some of the action aid activities in that region. I said, the only way I can go, provided you establish a water museum. I don't know what they were eating. They agreed. So it must have been something interesting that they were eating, and they immediately, yes, no problem, we'll do it. So, and one of the things that I think we agreed on that very day was to have an international conference every year, and bringing people out of Dhaka. And the reason I said, you know, don't make it in Dhaka, because Dhaka has too many museums. So one would be that people can go out. So I really must congratulate my, what you call, the Commodore for, you know, pointing out and for flagging this idea that a water museum will be built in Cox's Bazar. I think that's a very good idea. And in that way, Cox's Bazar too can be flagged in an interesting way. So I'm looking forward to that museum as well. Now, very quickly on the topic, because when we sat down to think about the topic, and Farah's idea was to have climate change brought in. I guess largely because she just returned from COP28. Anyway, whatever it is, you know, I'm a critique of all these COPs, so maybe I immediately said, why not? So, you know, water, river, and climate change, all the concept that you see there needs to be rethought. And this is I've been flagging for years. Water has to be rethought. I pointed out it's not H2O. And Farah said, you know, how long you're going to say you know, the same thing again and again. I said, it has to be put into the mind that it's not H2O. Yes, it's H2O, twice hydrogen plus oxygen, but when it comes to water in social science, it's H2O, P4. There has to be pollution, there has to be power, there has to be politics, and not to mention profit. So H2O is fine, but you don't get H2O outside the lab. Immediately when water comes outside the lab, it's H2O, P4. River also has to be rethought, and myself and working with Professor Jayanta Bandyopadhyay led me to this acronym that river, well, first river, Nodi has to be, you know, mainstream. I think we should start using the word Nodi. It's much older concept than river. You get the concept of Nodi in you know, in Upanishad, and what it means is Atta, Pran, and Shakti. That is what Nodi means. So Atta, Pran, and Shakti, that means soul, life, and power. If we want to translate that into positive power, if you want to translate that into English. And then river, the scientific concept of river would be, and I also, this is something myself and Jayanta Bandhavai got together, is you need to understand river as webs, or Nodi as webs, W-E-B-S. There has to be 4 things to call a river river. It must have water, it must have energy, it must have biodiversity, and the last S is sediment. If you don't have these 4 things, water, energy, biodiversity, and sediment, or what I would, the acronym would be WEBS, it's not a river. So from that point of view, you need to reconceptualize the concept of water, you need to reconceptualize the river, and what I tried to do yesterday is to reconceptualize the understanding of climate change and make it into climate futures. Climate will change. Climate is something that is not going to stay there. Everything changes, and of course, climate will also change. I think, what do we do with that? So you need to reconceptualize that into climate futures and focus more on innovation or the creative part of human beings. And it's not adaptation, but it's more than adaptation. It's adaptation plus, I would say. And that's the reason I think one of the slide was on tech revolution or technolution. How you bring technology into it and make the best of it and make it sustainable as well. And for that, you need a totally different understanding of climate change altogether. Yes, you can keep participating in these COPs, year after year. That's not a problem. But if you look at some of the figures, it's you by 2030 you need something like $435 billion. Is going to become 1 trillion by 2050, and what you have up until now is a pledge of only 800 million, not even a billion, not even 1 billion. So it's no fun chasing after Morichika, as I always make fun of it. So what do? Do we just keep on copying COPs and waiting for this million or whatever dollars coming? I don't think so. I think there's way out, and the way out is to put more focus on the creative side of human beings. And Water Museum is one of those, no doubt, as would be rain harvesting, as would be water village. Some of the slides, if you remember last time, yesterday, that I tried to, there are ways of looking at water totally differently. And that, I think, ActionAid can promote. And I pointed out to Farah even yesterday that all the, whatever the infrastructure ActionAid has, needs to be made river harvested institutions. Yeah, these are the ways to look into and to see how the young people can contribute to this creative effort. And we can't just keep on looking outside the world. Bangladesh is 7th or 8th largest country in the world. Our body language must be 7th or 8th largest. There's no reason why the small countries, they may have some money, but to tell us what to do, I think that should change. It's a very old civilization. Bengal has been a very, very old civilization. We can immediately go to 6th century BC. Our republicanism did not come from the Europeans. We had republican system way back in the 6th century BC, the Lichavi Republic. So it's an old civilization. And as part of the old civilization, which has gone through tremendous climate changes, if I can use the word again, there's no reason why we should be scared and fearful of what what changes will be coming. So that's the reason I think climate futures would be much more important way to deal with all these things. I'm sure the other things is this is the 9th conference, and one idea is to publish a research volume of all the conferences that we had, and maybe to have it launched in the next on the 10th. And lastly, let's continue the debate. I've always been non-conformist, and it's good to be a non-conformist because it's fun. It's fun to be a non-conformist. I'm sure 80% people will not agree, but even if they agree 20%, that's good enough. So my point here is let's continue the debate. I don't think we have a final answer. Some of the things will come back after 30, 40 years, but it's important to flag the ideas as much as possible. Thank you very much. I'm really sorry I have to leave. There is a little bit of an official thing where I have to speak also, so I have to rush. Sorry, Riaz, and Sarah and everybody in the platform, but good luck with all your presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sarah, any reflections from the conversations and anything you want to share? No?
Unmute myself. No, I'd like to hear the ambassador speak because I know the WAMUNET is doing a lot of work with the Dutch UNESCO Intergovernmental Committee as well, Intergovernmental Hydrology Committee there as well. We're getting a lot of support from the Dutch and from IHE in Delft. So it's nice to have the ambassador here, and I'd like to hear him before I leave, actually.
Okay. I'll invite Riaz then. Riaz Hamidullah, our ambassador to the Netherlands. Riaz, over to you. And thank you for making the time.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon to everyone, or good morning to others, wherever we are joining from. Coming at the fag end has both pros and cons, but I'll try to see that.
No, I'm saying we've just been joined by Dr. Ainu Nishad, Professor Emeritus. So, and we are listening to Riaz. Okay, please continue, Riaz.
Salam to sir. So as I was saying that I connect essentially in a very cryptic manner to share with you or flag to you a couple of my own observations, may I say, dare I say reflections, particularly when I see the intersection of the dominant and the emerging contours of intersections of water and climate nexus. Quite often it gets difficult for me even to impress upon that to functionaries back in Dhaka. So a couple of points. My first would be when I look at the title of the conference, when you were talking of resilience, and of late, as I understand, resilience as has been understood and approached is more of an organized societal frame. And as one would be aware or might be following or soon come to know, particularly courtesy the work of the Global Commission on Water for a year now, the focus is more market driven. So where I would struggle, and I'm sure many, is that in an informal economy setting, even societal setting, and where we are again dominated by a substantial majority of smallholders, how much of the resilience actually that we profess would actually hold for Bangladesh, particularly when we go for environmental plans and so forth. This is something I would like to broadly leave to you, because time would not allow. My second point is, I think that Professor Imtiaz Ahmed was pointing about water future. It is not a singular water future. We have to deal with multiple water futures. I was invited to Wageningen University, the leading agroscience university globally, not in Netherlands. And they recently launched a global nature-based future challenge for, and the first focus country is Bangladesh, where they got 120 students signed on from world over. And they have asked them on a 6-month basis to look for practical, impactful solutions that can be applied in Bangladesh, all data-driven. We are in talks with CAGIs, SEGIs for accessing them. Now, that should lead me to, or ask me to connect with Bangladesh Deltapan, for instance. Now, many try to define Deltapan, and I see often a very uncomfortable centricity of structuralist interventions. I don't know what kind of news is that. So far, we struggled to see the first project, a very first project in under Delta Plan take off. There was one attempted in Cholonbil, but could not. Why? That's another conversation. My submission to everyone, if we are to look at seriously and again to look for solution-driven approach, we have to understand that Delta Plan is not simply some water infrastructure, etc. And the way we understand approach or approach water, forget about rivers, and because Delta Plan, my categorization qualification would be that it has to be it is a plan that has to marry the future of Bangladesh economy and ecology. Economy gets missed out because we do not want to bring in the future of Bangladesh manufacturing in Bangladesh, future of urbanization in Bangladesh, future of agriculture and agro-food systems in Bangladesh. And in the process, what are or what should be the competing scenarios that we are to deal with? It's been almost now, 11 years that we are working with the Delta Plan, but I do not see the layer of knowledge institutions or knowledge generation and building on knowledge and data to make the projects future-proof. In fact, the projectization itself should actually merit to be questioned, as also how do we balance the traditional water wisdoms. These all I'm saying, rest assured, courtesy conversation with pundits in this country. Where I would also bring in next is, again, connected to the point that I said, I think when we think of interventions and all, and this is again coming through several conversations with Aichi, for instance, is that we miss out, even in Bangladesh, the choices and the trade-offs particularly between the sectors. Let me give you an example. I'm sure you know what happened in Mireshorai Economic Zone when they were asked to source water. And this is something which would increasingly keep coming. In fact, where at some point we would see that the two different sectors, if I call them sector as such, between we see the difficult choices that will be, or trade-offs that we'll have to make. We are at the very early stage of industrialization. We are yet to see the kind of competing demands which would come. Now, let me then connect to what happened at the globally and is happening, and then how this may merit attention of our attention. UN Water Conference came out with so much of excitement, where people like Joyita Gupta and others have worked. My conversations bring something very interesting. One is that if you see the SDGs as well, 2030 agenda, all three combined, we left water to market. Even Bangladesh Delta Plan states that every year 2.5% of Bangladesh GDP will be devoted. Out of that, 0.5 will come from Bangladeshi private sector, and another 0.5 will come from international private sector. What does it mean? We are to go towards PPP. Now, what is the experience of Bangladesh in PPP? I need not belabor on that. My point is the private, global or national, or kind of concessions and incentives, these are unlike, because this has to be a fully balanced social and economic incentive to do really understand what kind it should be. It should not be something that Danone is given, for example, and the way they understand. Now, that is where actually what I cited with Wageningen, I think we need to really see, and I'm just in conversation with them where they approached me and said, Ambassador, we know Bangladesh, we also are mindful that in Bangladesh, combining your wetlands, আমরা যেগুলোকে হাওর, বিল, বাওর বলি, it's roughly or approximately 10% of Bangladesh land mass. I do not know whether rivers are also combined into that. Now, if you understand that, does it underline? So Wageningen is thinking that how in the coasts and inland waters, they can test and eventually develop cost-effective floating house, for instance. I'm bringing these illustrations only to underscore that it is these things, as much as we talk about the broader scape, as I was listening to the Cox's Bazar Authority chair, we need to go for impactful so that we not only we not only can connect to the aspirations, but also build trust and confidence in the people who have waited for far too long. What is the kind of space actually we are trying to walk, particularly when we are talking water and river? And to my mind, it would be very important to address two things. One is that we co-create innovation. I'll give example and what do I mean, and also co-curate solutions. What do you mean by co-curating innovation? I have a practical and something which has already been delivered. There's a Dutch organization, something like our science laboratory, BCSIR, Science and Industrial Research Council, called TNO in Netherlands. Last year, I'm very happy to share with you, they successfully collaborated with the Bangladeshi company and they developed a completely bio-based, biodegradable sanitary napkin, which is cost competitive, and that is already in market, available in Bangladesh. Why does it matter? Because then their understanding was that this is something which would help the aquifer in Bangladesh, if not destroy your rivers, canals, and etc. See the understanding of the who have never or hardly has ever been to Bangladesh. What do I mean by co-creating solutions? Again, one of the IHE professors has been going back and forth with Bangladesh for 3 years now, and he has a fascinating intervention which has already met with success in Raujan and Keshapur. It's called Urban Demonstrators. It's ready, where they, as much as they tackle the problems of, I hesitate to say pollution, but basically human-induced tampering of water bodies, but then create them into publicly owned public assets. A third example which comes to my mind right now, if you go to Patuakhali and down south in Bangladesh, where we are battling the salinity intrusion in our aquifers, Dutch has come with very simplified technology where he is saying that, we can trap the rainwater harvested underground. And the way we see that people are risking their livelihoods and habitat, that can be tackled with very simple technology. Now, this I would connect with news which travels around that Khulna city, for instance, is having 170 to 180 days a year where the salinity level is beyond human permissible level. So what I'm to submit to you that there are, technology is there, innovations are there, frontiers of possibility for adaptive solution development is also there. What we need to create is truly a framework and to see that how do we connect this. If we simply leave it to market, I'm afraid it won't deliver. Do we leave it to public sector? The Dutch experience and not only in Bangladesh but elsewhere also suggests no, not necessarily. So we need to really reach out to the public and private space and see that what are the kind of water futures, competing scenarios we are about to face, even in 5 to 10 years from now, which we are perhaps not yet very sensitive about, and then to calibrate our options. And finally, what I would humbly suggest is that even for ActionAid, to really begin this conversation, take this conference to next level by bringing to the attention that we need to make investment into innovation and technologies which would have significant water footprint or which would contribute to or directly relate to our water futures. I think I've brought in things, but I'm afraid sometimes as I interact, our institutions in terms of understanding of water, #water or #water future are still not there. They take water for given.
Right.
And I'm sometimes very critical. Please allow me, sorry, I'll finish. That we are really driven by dominant narratives that Bangladesh is one of the water abundant countries where 5,000 liters per person. And actually these are doing more damage than good. So I thank you for your allowance and for letting me speak my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Riaz. It's always interesting to hear about other experiences. It's not necessary we have to agree to everything, but you are bringing in the learning from the Netherlands and so on. Edo, are you with us? Would you like to say a few words before I move on to the closing ceremony, and I'll be inviting Dr. Aino Nishad. Edo? Do you?
Yeah.
I think Sarah has left. Sarah, are you there? No, she had to leave because she said she would leave at 4:30.
No,
Yes.
I'm just going. So
Okay.
just
Any
wanted to say
comments from
thank
you? Okay.
No, not right now. Thanks.
And thank you so much. I'm sure we'll follow up and learn more and connect. Also Commodore Absar will come. We will come together and have a session with you to understand on the details.
Yeah, I think the Cox Museum's idea is a great one for an eco-museum.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you,
So-
Sarah.
Oh,
Edo?
Yes, Sarah and me are representing the Water Museums Network. And Italian museums, some of them are affiliated to it. So what can I say? Pointed out that you mentioned lots of time, the local community. I insist on this because otherwise it would be only a theme for experts and people who are experienced, but at some level. We need to enlarge the audience. We need to involve young people, students in this theme, and to make it known. And to make it known, it's very important to find out some cultural solutions and social ones. If local communities don't feel their territory, their own field, I think that only the actions would be vanished in somehow. So I point out the accent of the involving of community. This is very important. Sorry.
No, thank you so much. I can't tell you how enriched I have been since I became a member of the Water Museum Network, and over the years, it's 10 years now, and learning from all the different experiences. I would have never thought that Paris would have a museum converting its drainage system. But Paris does have a system, a museum of the old drainage system, and they take you through the journey. I mean, that is the furthest from my thoughts, I would say. But thank you so much. Now, as we come to the closing session, and we are very honored to have Dr. Aino Nishad, I just wanted to highlight to Dr. Aino Nishad that in the last 2 days, we have, of course, had multiple speakers. We have talked about the climate change, the nexus with river, water, resilience, and it was quite clear that for a long time it's been human-centric. Now we're talking about climate change, and changing the system has always been dictated by a complex interplay of geopolitics, national politics, human psychology, neoliberal economics, and is at odds with the capitalistic development. So we are in a capitalist system. So market, as Riaz continuously on several occasions emphasized that market and the role of the market. One of the most important roles has to be that of the community. And I think that is what Edo was also emphasizing. And while we have hydro diplomacy, we have water diplomacy, diplomats and policymakers, of course, have an important role to play, and they will play the role based on their national mandates, they will play the role based on geopolitics, and none of which is static because it changes. The priorities in the 60s and the 80s and now in 2023 is probably different, and there are moments for influencing. And climate change is recognized as an existential crisis, and water plays a significant, water is a part of that crisis, and whether it's too much water, sea level rise, floods, salinity, or there's drought, there's heat, there's erratic rain. All this is challenging us and our lives. Protecting rivers in the face of climate change it has come up. We've talked about looking at river as an entity. We've looked at river has rights. We've had legal experts tell us about how different legal provisions have recognized river as a living entity, have talked about respecting river, accommodating with river. And then we had those conversations about bilateralism, multilateralism, geopolitics. Where is India the Himalayas, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, SAARC. So those conversations took place. What we heard the minister said that he was open, his ministry would be prioritizing the water crisis as well. They will take a transdisciplinary approach, and they were interested to speak to multi-stakeholders. Micro, macro level contributions are needed, whether that's for the adaptation plan, mitigation. We heard about energy transition and sensitive energy projects that include people and people's participation will be critical going forward. We can't just think of an infrastructure project or an energy project without realizing the context and therefore bringing in the green dimensions to it. We need a comprehensive understanding because of the vulnerabilities of the communities, whether it's in the front line or whether it's in the Howrah area, the different ecological setups, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Brazil, everybody is being impacted in one way or the other. Therefore, we need to have this conversation. So the dialogue, conversation, platform, research, advocacy, campaign, all needs to come together. So there was a lot more. I cannot summarize it, and neither does whoever gave me this didn't have all of it. So I mean, you're an expert. You've heard these conversations for a long time. I would like you to focus on what should be a way forward, because we are concluding today. And from your experience, and what would you suggest? Are you happy to sit here and speak, or would you like to?
Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. First, my apologies that I didn't turn up today. I was scheduled to be here at the middle of the day, and that session was focused on, definitely it has happened on basin management, river water management, etc. The organizers have been very kind to me. They allowed me to come when I could manage to come and give me the floor. Both topics related to water and water management, especially transboundary water management, I have a lot of exposure on it. I had been Bangladesh government's member of the negotiation team for 18 years, not a matter of joke. From December 1982 to November 1999, exactly 18 years. And I had studied the transboundary water relationship in various basins of the world. That gives me some understanding what is wrong. And since 2007, I have been deeply involved in climate change. The reason I'm saying this thing, I will be talking from personal exposure to the issue, personal experience, not theoretical one. What we are missing is the politics of both water and politics of climate change. Somehow, the organizers had sent me one PowerPoint presentation. That was Imtiaz's presentation on climate change, and I loved it. But I did not like what he talked about loss and damage. And I'm sitting next to Farah Kabir. I should move away a little bit, because when I talk against it, I clarify what is my understanding of the issue, what is the politics of it. then I believe most of the people in this room will not believe me. Having said that, let me talk about rivers first. Yes, rivers have a right. Where it is written? It was first declared in New Zealand to satisfy the demand of the local people, the Aborigines, because waters of a particular river had religious significance. They didn't want any water to be disturbed, and Supreme Court of New Zealand respected that and declared this river has a right and it should not be disturbed for other reason. The next came, I think, in Ecuador, when a mining company was dumping all their spoil on the river, and the river was choked, and the Supreme Court gave a ruling that rivers have a right, you cannot block its flow. And the third one, tragically, is a tragedy. It happened in India. The High Court of Himachal province or Uttaranchal, one of these states, declared that the rivers have a right and the rivers should not be disturbed, and if anything is done on the river, the integrity of the river must be maintained. And the state government took the case to Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court overturned the decision. So the true story is, in India, rivers have no right, as per decision of the Supreme Court. The legal experts in Bangladesh only talks about the first decision of the High Court, but not the final decision of the Supreme Court. In Bangladesh, when these 4 rivers or 6 rivers surrounding Dhaka, there was a case and the Supreme Court said, yes, these rivers have a right. Now, why this right is violated? What is the river? The rivers have to move. I did my PhD on river mechanics. A river does not erode, is not a river to me, an alluvial river. It can happen in the rocky part, even in the ocean. When there is an ocean current, it moves in a wandering manner. There is no resistance from the bank because water is flowing through water. So why does it? Because that needs the least amount of energy for the river. Think of your childhood. You are asked to cross a playground, go to the other corner. Would you travel by a straight line? No. You will wander around and find your most convenient route. Anyway, I'm not going into further scientific details of that, but everybody realizes water is a basic issue and there is always an upstream and downstream problem. The Indian delegates told me one funny thing. China is upper riparian to India with respect to the Brahmaputra river. So when China started doing something on the on the river in the Tibet area, in the Chinese internal own territory, India obviously protested. And India used all the arguments that is in favor of a lower riparian. And they jokingly told me, all the arguments you have given to us against our action, we copied them and used it against China. Does it mean they accept our arguments and they would act accordingly? Answer is no. India is the best country in the world who have their internal law on transboundary water issue. The Interstate Water Dispute Act of 1958 is the best document. But still you find in South, Tamil Nadu and Kerala are fighting, and Andhra and Telangana are fighting. Even the Chief Minister of Delhi had to go to Supreme Court to collect water for Delhi metropolitan area from Haryana and Punjab. Anyway, so where the solution would come is a very interesting issue. I'm linking with climate change. Climate change, the result is water change. There will be change in hydrologic cycle. There will be change in movement of water. EC Mode has published a very thick report. I think it weighs about 2 kilograms or more. I had difficulty in holding it. It talks about how the snow or Himalayas would melt and what would be the result downstream. it says the amount of water would remain same. Sorry. But the timing would change. Think of 2023. We had higher rainfall in the month of Chaitra and Boishak and Joishto, higher than what is the average normal flow. But then in Ashar and Shravan, that is in June, July and August, the flow was much lower because rainfall was much low. And then there was more rainfall in September and October compared to the expected flow. What was the result? Since 2017, we started importing rice, and even this year we would be importing rice and wheat from other countries. We lost our food security because of climate change. And in 2017, there was heavy flood in March and April, unusual. Government data, if I use, we had loss of 1 million tons of food grain. But government did not announce loudly the loss of almond crop in the month of October, end of September and October. Another $2 million. The government started buying rice from wherever they can. The Prime Minister ordered, get it from either through private sector or public sector. Both parties ran to India. The price of rice in those days was $300 per metric ton. Immediately it jumped to $800 per metric ton. And Bangladeshi newspapers were full of articles against India that they have done it mischievously. Prime Minister of India requested Prime Minister of Bangladesh, buy the rice at $800 immediately, otherwise going to jump. And it did jump to $1,200, $1,200. But India did provide rice at $800 per ton from 300. And the price has not settled back. Still it is 400 or 500 or 600 now. So we destabilize the global food market. We are buying rice every year because of climate change, because of the uncertainty and flow. We could manage this if it was one basin-wide approach if we had followed. The two prime ministers of the two countries have agreed on September 2011 that from now on all the rivers should be managed on basin-wide approach. What does it mean? It means you store the monsoon water upstream at a suitable location, making it environmentally and socially acceptable, and that would increase the flow downstream. You will like an evidence, I will give you an evidence. Study the Gomte River in Kumilla. It comes from Indian Tripura and flows through Bangladesh, and what was the flow that was there, say, 50 years back in the dry season, right today the flow is higher. Why? India has constructed 2 reservoirs upstream to produce electricity. Production of electricity justifies the project, but result is the flow is higher. And the last chief minister of Tripura demanded that India should negotiate with Bangladesh and Gomti should be made navigable, because navigation is the cheapest form of transportation of bulk good, which even Modi understands. Modi has stopped highway construction in India and pushing riverine transportation. And Bangladesh has signed with India that Bangladesh should allow those goods to come from Allahabad. They currently come up to Farakka, go to Calcutta, and then enter through Bangladesh and come to Ashuganj. But Modi is now asking, can the Ganges or the Padma be used, come to Aricha and then go up? And Bangladesh is now doing huge dredging from Sirajganj to Indian border to Indian border to respect that decision. But we do not understand the whole, technically the issue. Indian government signed an agreement with Nepal, I think 2 weeks back, that they would be buying about 10,000 megawatt or more hydropower from Nepal. Now, Nepal was holding to make Bangladesh as a partner to it. Prime Minister Hasina has allocated $1 billion to be an equity partner to this project. But the control is with the energy ministry. And the energy ministry thinks that they would buy electricity from Nepal. Why you should go for equity partner? They do not understand the value of it. And the opportunity is lost, is gone. The whole economy of Bhutan is based on hydropower. 80% of their GDP comes from hydropower. But you have to do it judiciously. You just cannot build a dam anywhere. It has submergence problem, environmental problem, social problem, but solution can be done. And the guidelines are available in the World Commission on Dams report. So anyway, but discussion and negotiation is built on 8 building blocks. In 1992, when the first legal document was produced, UN Convention on UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, it had 4 building blocks: mitigation, adaptation, finance, and means of implementation in the form of capacity and transfer of technology. In 2007, transfer of technology in Bali and capacity building was separated as 2 separate building blocks. So we have now mitigation, adaptation, finance, capacity building, transfer of technology. And they added another thing, which is the global target. The target was said that we should have the control of temperature that was 2007 in Bali, within 2 degrees Celsius and preferably at 1.5. That came a little bit later in 2015. Now the whole discussion is built on 8 building blocks: mitigation, adaptation, finance, capacity building, transfer of technology, global target, loss and damage, and compliance mechanism. Are we ready? Answer is no. In Bangladesh, the understanding what is happening in the world is almost nil. The whole climate change negotiation are organized in 2 approaches. One is science, which is managed by IPCC, that was established in 1988 or 89. The first report came out in 1990, and they said that do something to control greenhouse gas, increase in greenhouse gas production. And very quickly, one international convention was produced that was in 1992, signed by most of the countries in 1992. The world acted very fast. Otherwise, that agreement would not have been possible. That 1992 is our base. Based on that, we had Kyoto Protocol, and now we have the Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is subsidiary to the UNFCCC. Now we have these 8 building blocks. Now in 1992, when adaptation was being pushed, civil society very correctly and small island states very correctly demanded what is the upper limit of adaptation. There are countries like Tuvalu, Kiribati, they pronounce as Kiribati, Marshall Island, and Niue and few other countries which are hardly 1 meter or 1.5 meter above sea level. They would vanish because they would disappear, because the projection in 1990 was 4 meter as sea level rise. And then came the term loss and damage. The loss and damage is direct loss and indirect loss, khoi and khoti. And they demanded, I think it was Tuvalu or Marshall Island, that there should be provision for that. What happens to us? We must receive compensation. You should have global insurance mechanism, and there should be reparation. You should accept your responsibility. And the powerful countries of the world did not allow it to be discussed till 2010. In 2010, after failure of Copenhagen, the Copenhagen COP, and I would say the Dubai COP is also a total failure to me. Why? In Copenhagen, the language was the COP notes, no decision. And the same thing has happened in Dubai. The COP notes. What are the things they are noting? I will come to that. So in 2010, Actually, it was started by South Africa. On every theme, they appointed 2 ministers to conduct the negotiation. On adaptation, the responsibility was to Australia and Bangladesh. Dr. Hassan Mahmood was the negotiator on behalf of the whole world. And the island countries managed to raise loss and damage in 2010, and it was included in the Cancun decisions. And finally, it became a part of the Paris Agreement. But up to that point, loss and damage was subsidiary to adaptation. You can adapt, you cannot adapt, what do you do? That discussion was not complete, and therefore in Paris Agreement, loss and damage had a separate mention and a separate talking point, and that is why I identified it as one of the 8 building blocks. 2011, South Africa, no discussion on loss and damage. 2012 in Dubai, Bangladesh has a seat B on the front row, so I was sitting there, and the Annex 1 countries just they walked away. They said they will not sit in the meeting if we talk about compensation, global insurance and reparation. Incidentally, Bangladesh delegate was co-chair of that session. They ran, and I was hardly 10 feet or 15 feet away from them. The third world countries agreed that we will not raise the word compensation, we will not raise the word reparation, and we will not push for global insurance. But is the global insurance company, the major Munich Re and Swiss Re and Lloyds, they are pushing the agenda. So the third world countries, and I would give full credit to Salimul Haq, he was successful in leveraging or pushing the issue, and the rich countries agreed to accept and do something. But where they decided and agreed to do what? That was in the G20 meeting in New Delhi before the COP. Okay. Now, I will come back to water, but this is important. So, in Dubai, when on the first session, Mr. Sultan Al Jaber announced financing on loss and damage, and it was $445 million or something, and USA provided $18 million, not billion dollar, peanuts. And I told whoever with me that I feel something foul game is going on. Everybody was jumping. Oh, we have received fund. For what? Who will pay? For what? And Pakistan was the key party, one of the main force behind the whole thing.
In 2007, they had the floods.
Okay.
They were the big advocates.
Now what the chair is saying, Pakistan had a big flood and they estimated their loss is $20 billion. Now, if I am made responsible for disbursement of loss and damage fund, I will not give a single penny to Pakistan. Why? Pakistan had full embankment system in the British period. Over the last 100 years, they didn't do anything in maintaining those embankments. So when the floods came, in 2012 there was a flood. And when the flood was passing through Peshawar, they started repairing the flood embankment in Lahore and Multan in that area. How do I know? I was offered a consultancy on that. Anyway, so point is, you have to try for your adaptation. You fail to adapt, like sea level rise, we can't adapt to it. Like salinity has already come up to Gopalganj. So they have announced the fund on loss and damage, and we are very happy. But what was my expectation in Doha? It was in Dubai. My expectation was the global target on adaptation and mitigation would progress a lot. Last night I was reading an article in the UNFCCC website, and they claim 5 positive things in Dubai. All are rubbish. Now, I will come to water, because everything depends on politics, not what is right or what is wrong. You need to understand what is the political game. Discussion on water at the global level started in around 1945 in UN system. And it continued and nothing was happening, and that at certain point USA said, this is the last year, you close your discussion and formulate the law. And that law was formulated. International Convention on Non-Navigational Uses of International Water Courses. I still can say it in one breath because I have uttered it so many times. And Asif Nazrul has done his PhD on that. He was here. And he has printed that his PhD thesis on the book, but I will correct it. His PhD thesis has not been printed. He has added a lot of things. I was there on the publication ceremony. Point is, in first global meeting on water management was held in 1977 in Mar del Plata. And it was due, the second meeting was due in 1997. It didn't happen. That resulted civil society to set up two bodies, World Water Council and World Water, I forget, one is based in North Africa and the other one is based in Sweden. And the Swedish group attends meeting, organizes meeting every year. Nice things are said. I had been keynote speaker 2-3 times, so what? It's a private group of, states come, parties come, but there is nothing behind it. And then World Water Council every 3 years. But finally, in 2023, April, the next global meeting was held. Our Prime Minister was supposed to go. She didn't go for some other compulsion. And whole thing was handled by Foreign Office. Bangladesh position paper was presented by someone very senior, I'm not going to identify. Somehow I was one of the designated discussant, and I had to say that Bangladesh's position paper is equal to suicidal note. They didn't understand what is to be there because they did not want to say anything about the upper riparian. So how you will do it? Riaz Hamidullah, a good friend of mine, though much younger in age, he talks about Delta Plan. What is Delta Plan? There is no plan in Delta Plan. It is a 110 crore taka plan produced by the Dutch along with a big group of Bangladeshi experts. Who were there? Not anybody that I know. They had 3 teams working on that. First team produces 27 technical reports. Second group produced 686-page final strategy report. I was an advisor to them. I said, don't make it more than 35 pages. They produced 700 something pages. Nobody reads it. The third team was working with World Bank, produced the package, the proposals, the program. And this is nothing but copy of 1964 IECO master plan and 1972 land and water sector study. A little bit thing was picked up by 2002 national water plan. Nothing is new. What we knew in 1964 is copied in the Delta Plan. I'm not pushing it further. It says all the right things, but much old. Nothing is new. Nothing is innovation. So I will just close. In climate change negotiation or in water negotiation, which is essentially bilateral, we must understand the political game that would be played. Ganges Water Treaty was signed in 1996. I was one of the negotiators on that. I will not tell you everything, but what I will say, it was only possible because the 2 political masters agreed on it. And the whole negotiation was completed in 6 days. Is it possible? Yes, it is possible if there is political will. With political guidance, you can have as much technical discussion, options be worked out, economic analysis, financial analysis, nothing is going to happen. And the legal aspect is the last element that I'm going to touch. Because the lawyers do not understand the substance. You give them the fact and they would write in a particular language. So, Ganges Water Treaty has a lot of weaknesses. Why? Because we didn't get appropriate political support on that. I'm sorry to say the support did not come from the Bangladesh side because our top bosses didn't understand what is going on. I still feel frustrated about it. Anyway, so to sum up, water issue is going to be a big issue in Bangladesh. The main theme of climate change negotiation, the main goal of Paris Agreement is to ensure food security in all the countries. That's the only one goal. In 2030, I will not be there. Farah would have a little bit more white hairs.
So I'm going to still have hair. That's wonderful. I'm not going to go.
Okay. But food security is going to be the main issue in the world. And water is the essential element in ensuring food security. You have to control the too much water, and you have to ensure too little water is supplemented by some flow. Climate change, water is not an agenda as of today, because the big powerful countries would not allow water to be raised. Around 2012 or 13, Bangladesh, Mexico, Chile, some African countries, we tried to put it on the agenda. We failed. Not because of the powerful country, but 5 countries belonging to our group. I will name the countries: China, India, Turkey, Brazil, and South Africa. The 4 countries are still together. Egypt has taken a different position because Ethiopia has constructed a major dam called Renaissance Dam, and Egypt is going to suffer as a lower riparian. Now they have changed their view. Even in the SDG, of the 17 SDG, 6 is on water. And the 6.6, that article has some mention about transboundary water. That is a good enough point for the world to move things together. So let me stop. Politics is the controlling factor. And if Donald Trump wins somehow, then we are in for real difficult days. Thank you very much.
A huge thank you, Dr. Ainun Ishad. He's someone we can listen for hours, but unfortunately we have to bring a closure. And Riaz, any 30-second, 1 minute? Otherwise, and I'm going to wrap it up.
I'm tempted, Appa, because
not more than
Bishop
1
sir has
minute.
not more than 1 minute, but I can echo, and I think I stand by what I said about the Delta Plan.
Okay.
And I would repeat that in the Delta planning and the way things are happening are not named or understood still in terms of the water and agriculture, water and urbanization, and water and manufacturing underscored. Are still missed out. And I would submit that this should be another conversation that you may like to please pick up, because these are not coming in the civil society domain.
Okay, we shall try. Commodores.
Thank you. In fact, my only request will be that we have discussed about a lot of points, lot of challenges, but these points and challenges are not quite, we are not very conversant with this, the common people, the civil society and the policy makers. So you have to make efforts continuously so that you can go for the policy advocacy and sensitize the policy makers. Thank you very much.
Well, you give a lot of responsibility to us, and we are such a small fry in this whole affair. The only reason that we have pursued, and it's the 9th conference, is our belief that both that rivers are an entity, living entity, and communities have the right to to live with it, to voice and to create and craft solutions, because climate change is not something that's going to go away, it's a reality. So just to sum it up, I mean, we have had very engaging 2 days of conversations and we've discussed a lot of topics, but at the center of all this, of course, was that politics, political actors, and also about, in the context of capitalism, neoliberalism, how market plays up. And so profit, unless politicians are convinced that in their 5-year term there's some profit to look into water, to look at green transition, to have multi-stakeholder partnerships for collaboration, to talk about transboundary, to have bilateral, trilateral agreements, the communities, the vulnerable communities remain at risk, and we have to work together to try and ensure that our voices are heard. And considering this scenario, ActionAid Bangladesh will continue to provide such platforms. We will have the 10th International Conference in January 2025. Before that, we will be compiling the research papers. We will have a publication based on the research papers and a publication based on all the different presentations and 10 years journey. So we're hoping to have 2 volumes. We had dedicated resources for the Water Museum. We have supported it, we work with it, it's one of our initiatives and we want to continue that, but we want to take it beyond Kuakata and spread it across, and so that it's something that is near the people and they can create their own museums. And we've just heard about living museums, and it doesn't have to be just the infrastructure, it's the concept, it's how you transform that concept. And so we will be in different spaces, we will be challenging climate politics, we will talk about loss and damage, we will talk about compensation, and we need collective support. And just as we learned today so much from Dr. Ainun Nishad, so we have to think, and particularly for the young people, আপনাদের সবাইকে কিন্তু আরো বেশি জানতে হবে, শুনতে হবে, বুঝতে হবে, এবং তারপরে এগুলোকে নিয়ে যেতে হবে। কারণ আমরা যদি নীতি নির্ধারকদের সঙ্গে দেন দরবার করি, তাহলে তো কিছু নিয়ে বলে তারপর বুঝিয়ে দিতে হবে কেন সে মানবে বা আমাদের কথা